Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Enabling Spaces. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for taking the time over a weekend. This is our fourth edition, and we're so glad that you could all join us today. And I want to quickly get started and introduce our not a speaker but a performer, and that's how we decided to start off our event today. I had the opportunity of first listening to Nemo perform at an event sometime back in 2016, and essentially within seconds he had the audience tapping their feet, and within minutes he had them up and dancing and hugging each other. And that's the kind of soul that he brings through his music, through Empty Hands music, really around themes of gratitude and kindness and empathy and everything that the world really needs today. And we said we can't start the event without a performance like that. And we're so glad, Nemo, that you agreed to give us your time today and start off the event like this. So Nemo, I think the floor is yours, the audience is all yours, and let's go.
All right. Thank you, brother, for inviting me to be a part of this with all of you. I can't really see anybody, but I know you are out there, and I just want to share love with everybody for doing the work you do and bringing love and compassion and just a commitment to our children, to our youth. And I'm excited to be here from Los Angeles right now with my parents, otherwise usually in Ahmedabad. And I'll just start off with not only a song, but just a message for me, as I have just like all of you been on a learning journey in the spirit of bringing whatever we can from our hearts to our youth. And as I had began my journey in Ahmedabad, working with youth and children, especially from underprivileged communities, one of the biggest lessons I've been learning is how important it is for us to offer our hearts in the work that we do without being attached to what needs to unfold. And it's a theme that I like to always identify as planting seeds, this idea that we can be our best selves, and those are the best seeds that we can plant. And when we do that from a space of selfless love, unconditional love, not trying to mold or create a result or a end product, or having expectations of where our kids need to end up or be, there comes this moment of surrendering to the process and having faith that there's a higher power involved. And so this first song I want to share with you is exactly that. It's a song called Planting Seeds, which I had the blessings to collaborate with a dear brother of mine, Daniel Namad. And it's been a song for me to try to practice in my life, not just about the song, but the message that is universal, which is offering our hearts and our love and our effort into everything we do, pour our soul into it, but not have any expectation for where it needs to go. So this song is called Planting Seeds. I spent a long time running. I never knew then what I know now. That the fruits, they always come in, but you can't go around just knocking them down. It takes a long time to show in. We plant the seeds, then we look at them now. But the roots are always growing, no matter if I'm there or never around. And if you get the words by the end of the song, please sing along wherever you are. It goes like this. Whatever grows will grow. Whatever dies will die. Whatever works will work. Whatever flies will fly. Whatever fails will fail. What's meant to soar will soar. I am planting seeds. It's like your whole life You've been training for this moment, and when the time comes, you just disown it, meaning you just surrender, don't control it. Not interested in the clay pots and mold and sitting next to your path, trying to unfold it, or waiting for the fruits to fall down towards you. Let it go, and now you're flowing, feeling quite gorgeous. You take steps away instead of towards it. What a rush, feeling freedom with nothing to hold. We've been taught that what you touch will always turn to gold, but now we're learning we let it go, it overflows with no credit to take, because no credit is owned. A higher power working deeper when the seeds are sowed. When the seeds are true, they're seeds of gold, but the real gold is joy when life starts to flow. When it does, you just smile, because now you know. I spent a long time running, I never knew then what I know now. That the fruits, they always come in. You can't go around just knocking them down. It takes a long time to show in. We plant the seeds then, we look at them now. But the roots are always growing, no matter if I'm there or never around. So feel free to sing along if you got caught some of the words. It goes like this: whatever grows will grow. Whatever grows will grow. Whatever dies will die. Whatever works will work. Whatever flies will fly. Whatever fails will fail. What's meant to soar will soar. I am planting seed. Whatever grows will grow. Whatever dies will die. Whatever works will work. Whatever flies will fly. Whatever fails will fail. What's meant to soar will soar. I am planting seeds. Whatever grows will grow. Whatever dies will die. Whatever works will work. Whatever flies will fly. Whatever fails will fail. What's meant to soar will soar. We are planting seeds, nothing more. There's a beautiful quote by a man named Nelson Henderson who says, the true meaning of life is to plant seeds of trees under whose shade you do not expect to sit. The idea of planting seeds, not because we want to reap the fruits, but because we hope that the fruits are reaped by somebody else. And in that space, in that spirit, in that journey of service, may we be humble enough to go along and surrender, and knowing that when we offer the cycle of life and receiving and giving and everything, the dancing of that whole beautiful complexity becomes actually very simple. And so bless you all. I think we might have a little time left for one more song that I'll share with you to kick off this beautiful conference with Enabling Spaces. And that is, I don't know if you guys can see the words back there. It says right there, some kids wrote a sign called "Be Kind." And to me, this is one of my favorite and most simple messages, and in the work we do, instead of being a teacher, I remember there was this one moment I was at a conference in Mumbai, Teach for India education conference, and one of our beautiful young keynote speakers starts off the whole conference saying, "We don't need any more teachers." And everybody gasped. It was full of teachers and principals and politicians and administrators. She says, "We need education fairies. And we need people that love, teachers that love, adults and mentors that love. And through that love, we find the right path for our children to learn." So this song is a song called "Being Kind." It's more and way beyond the idea of just teaching. It's the idea of living a life of gentleness, of humanity, of humility, a life to touch another soul, and knowing that is what brings you joy when you positively are able to touch the life or even just in the small daily routine of any human being, a small act of kindness. So I will share this last song and then look forward to everyone enjoying this beautiful conference ahead. So this song is called "Being Kind." In this time of what has unfolded over the past year, we haven't had much chance of physical contact. But if there's anybody around you now and it feels safe to give them a hug, then feel free to do so. I'm here with my mom and dad at their home, so I'm able to give them a hug. Well, my heart starts sinking and I'm thinking, what's the reason? Why we holding back from being kind? What's the disease? But then I sense we are fine. It'll all happen one small step at a time. When the world is full of violence and needs a little kindness, I just sit and pray in silence, and God shows me the signs. Open my eyes, realize we are fine. One small act at a time. Last night I'm walking home and a homeless man says hello with a smile to let me know that he's got a lot of hope. He says, have faith, young man, we are fine. The world is kind. One small act at a time. Small acts we do together, even though maybe alone, changes the world for the better. So we can call it home, and this is life. As we know, when our hearts are aligned, the magic that unfolds, one small act at a time. Throw your hearts up, let it fly high. Let your love for all the world spread through the skies. Let it drop down, let it all go. Spreading kindness through every single living soul. Can you see a love for me shining through? 'Cause what you see in me, I can see in you. And soon enough, you and me will be out of time, and kindness will be all we can leave behind. Yeah! Feeling grateful today. Never thought this day would come where I would feel it and say, each and every one of us have paved the way, doing good, and now we're all just moving up. When I'm kind to you, you pay it forward. This is how we build trust. Never had faith, but now I'm seeing you eye to eye. Wanna gift you my life, wanna spread love before I die. Thank you, God, for finally letting me realize when I serve man, I'm really serving you. In the skies, smiles everywhere, 'cause now everybody's got the bug. Ain't no life without the love. If it is, it ain't no fun. What we gonna do? Now just grab a friend and give a hug. Spread it out real wide so everyone can be touched. Throw your hearts up, let it fly high. Let your love for all the world spread through the skies. Let it drop down, let it all go. Spreading kindness to every single living soul. Can you see a love for me shining through? 'Cause what you see in me, I can see in you. And soon enough, you and me will be out of time, and kindness will be all we can leave behind. Oh, all we can leave behind. For you and I, kindness is all we can leave behind. Oh, 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 all we can leave behind. For you and I, kindness is all we can leave behind. Ooh, behind, behind. When all is said and done, kindness is all we can leave behind. Throw your hearts up, let it fly high. Let your love for all the world spread through the skies. Let it drop down, let it all go. Spreading kindness to every single living soul. Can you see a love for me shining through? 'Cause what you see in me, I can see in you. And soon enough, you and me will be out of time, and kindness will be all we can leave behind. Behind, all we can leave behind. Thank you. Have a blessed year, everybody. Sending my love, my prayers. May everybody keep their hearts filled with hope and with love for each other, for one another. And may we keep walking towards the light. Lots of love.
No, thank you so much. And what a great start. What a great start today. And What a lovely message. I think if our legacy is something, then it's just kindness. Kindness is all we can leave behind. I think that's such a brilliant message, and we're so glad that you started this off. Couldn't think of a better way to open the event today, Nemo. So once again, much gratitude to you, and please keep doing the amazing work that you do. And highly recommend everyone else. Please do follow Empty Hands Music. It's a great platform, fantastic music, and great soul in everything that you do, Nemo. Thank you so much once again. Great. Folks, I'm going to end the session now. Nemo, you're welcome to stay back, stay in the lounge for a bit, or have a sense of other speakers if you want. I'm going to end this session, and in a couple of minutes, we'll start with the keynote session. So thank you, Nemo, once again, and everyone, please stay tuned. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. And I'm absolutely honored today, on behalf of Learning Curve, to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Mark Greenberg. I'm not really going to go through all of his accomplishments, which will then take away most of the time for the keynote. So I'm going to try and keep that simple. Our connect with Mark, I think, almost started 2 or 3 years ago, and since then we've not only kept in touch, but Mark has been very instrumental, I think, in offering several perspectives on our program, helping us shape it. And certainly in the last few months, his insights have really shaped our program quite well. And I think his credentials are as impressive as it gets. But I think for me, what's more impressive than anything else is his keenness to help other organizations, to help other people who are in the field, who are in the domain, openly share knowledge, and a humility, I think, that comes only with that sort of experience. So, Mark, I can't say much more. I'm going to go hand over the floor to you. And Mark's talking to us today about how systemic SEL is a critical need in education today. Mark, the floor is all yours.
Great. Well, thank you, Subbu. And let's see. Of course, just when I want it to happen, let's see here. We have to make sure that I'm in the right window. Subbu, we did practice this. But,
so application window, Mark. If you open your application window and then go to slideshow.
But my PowerPoint's not showing. Let's see here. Okay, now let's try.
That's again. Okay. Take your time.
Let's see. I moved to a new computer because my sound was not working. I'm having a bit of a problem here. Let's see. Even though we practiced.
No problem, Mark. That's okay.
Well, it seems to be disappearing as I bring it up. Let me just begin by saying that I'm excited to be here with you all and to celebrate Enabling Spaces and the Learning Curve Foundation. I have never been to Hyderabad, and I look forward to it sometime in the future. I'm still struggling here with getting things started, and I wish I could solve this problem easily, but I'm not doing it so far. And that's because I moved my new computer because my sound wasn't working. Let's see. My system. Oh, I'm sorry, Subbu, that this is not working right at the moment. If you could just maybe fill in for a minute or two, I'll see if I can't fix this.
Not a problem, Mark. I think our audience is waiting. No problem at all. We've got time. When you clicked on share screen, are you able to see the way to share the application window, like the practice run?
Yeah, I am able to see it, but let's see here. Maybe it'll work this time.
Okay.
Aha, here we are. Okay, great. So good morning to everyone in India, but I see there are people from Singapore and Ghana and the UK, so it's a very international group. And Molly, of course, who's going to follow me, is here. Nemo from Los Angeles. So I think SEL is a very international concept, and here we are doing international work. So what I'm going to try to do is plant a couple seeds in Nemo's terms today and talk about a little bit about the current status of social emotional learning research and practice. I think that the crisis of teaching and what we can learn and what's the pathway to create these caring, compassionate schools that we're all yearning for. So I hope I'll address two questions today. What is the evidence that SEL is effective? And I won't belabor the research, I hope. And then what is systemic SEL? What does it mean to be systemic? And how is, I think, the Learning Curve Foundation and the Accelerate work they're doing so important to improve education and community well-being? So let me just start by saying, what is SEL? And you probably know that I'm a founder of CASEL in Chicago, and CASEL has just revised its definition a bit, that SEL is the process through which children and adults acquire and effectively apply, notice it's children and adults, the knowledge, attitudes, and skills necessary to understand and manage emotions, set and achieve positive goals, feel and show empathy for others, establish and maintain positive relationships, and make responsible decisions. And when you look at the definition, there may be different ones of you who are on this call that certain parts of this definition resonate more than others, and I think that's pretty natural. That definition comes from CASEL. CASEL is a collaborative for academic, social, and emotional learning, and I've been involved in CASEL since its origin about 26 years ago. And the goal of CASEL is not about a curriculum itself, but how to advance the science of SEL, how to expand effective practice in schools and communities, and how to improve policies. And it began with a 1997 book that we call SEL 101 that defined the field. And more recently, of course, we just edited a large handbook on social emotional learning with many chapters. So SEL can be thought about as having at least these 5 sets of skills. Those that are in the red are those that are interpersonal skills inside oneself, including managing one's emotions and achieving goals and recognizing one's emotions and strengths and attitudes. The aspects in the blue have to do with our interpersonal relations, our relations with others, that I think Nemo would summarize as love, but it includes other skills in addition, showing understanding and empathy, building citizenship through our engagement socially, forming positive relationships, as we know that we're craziest in our closest relationships, aren't we? That's what Dostoevsky said. And therefore, being able to manage conflict, repair problems when you've had a fight with a friend or a spouse. These are critical skills. It's not just about getting along. And then lastly, we need to wrap all this in responsible decision making. And that means we need to have a sense of an ethical grounding that allows us to make the kind of constructive choices that will improve the quality of life, not only for ourselves, but for others. You may know Fred Rogers, some of you, that in India, I'm not sure how many, but he's a famous American who led a television show for young children. And he said, there is no normal life that is free of pain. It's the very wrestling with our problems that can be the impetus for growth. That also sounds like a very Hindu or Buddhist statement in my mind. And that's the essence here, is that we need to think about how it is that we don't avoid problems, but instead we face them and face them with honesty and kindness. So there's a lot of research on SEL, well over 1,000 randomized trials and quasi-experimental trials at this point. There was a well-known meta-analysis done in 2011 that had 213 studies, as you see, and about 270,000 students. And it showed, of course, what you'd expect. What we'd hope is that if you do social emotional learning well in the classroom, it improves social emotional skills. It improves the positive attitudes about self and other. It leads to better classroom behavior, which is important, and in that respect also to better attention in the classroom. And that's probably why it explains that it leads to an 11 percentile point gain in standardized achievement tests. It's not by magic. Children who feel connected, who feel cared for, are able to settle down and harness their attention and their motivation to learn, and as a result, they do better academically. And of course, it helps on the other side too, reducing conduct problems and emotional distress. And these days, emotional distress is something that many of us are facing, but as we know, there's an epidemic of anxiety and depression, not only the result of COVID, but the result of being a teenager in this world. Programs that are effective have these four components. They're sequential. They have activities that are sequenced to teach children in a developmental order. They include active learning, so children are practicing the skills. It's not didactically just telling them about them. It's really having them practice and use them. It's focused on these, where time is focused on these skills and practice of the skills. And it's explicit. We have explicit skills that we think are important to target, because when children have these skills, they show better social and emotional outcomes. There's lots of economic data now by economists, and of course, for policymakers and business leaders, they like that idea. One study by Hank Levin and Clive Belfield in New York and Stanford showed that for every $1 invested, there's an $11 return. I've been involved in a curriculum called the PATHS curriculum that's been shown to have about a $22 return for each dollar invested. Now, a lot of focuses in SEL is on programs and curriculum in the classroom that teachers can teach, but there's a big question, and the question is SEL basically a program used by teachers in a classroom? That's a thought that many people have had in the past, but we at CASEL have never believed that. We believe the answer is no. The program is a critical component, as we want to make sure that teachers are using evidence-based programs that we know work. But systems change occurs at many levels, at the level of the classroom, at the level of the school. It has lots of processes, components, and actions. And so I want to talk in a broader way today about that broader aspect of what we call being systemic in social emotional learning. While the programs are a critical component, and lots of evidence to show that, they're only one component of a larger picture. And that larger picture is shown here by what's called the CASEL framework for systemic SEL. You see in the middle the 5 components of social emotional learning I've talked about, and then you see the first blue circle being the classroom instructional and climate practices. Those include the effective SEL curriculums, but also what is classroom climate like? Then there's the broader issue of what's the school-wide culture, both for adults and for children. What are the practices and policies that school puts in place? Do they put in harsh disciplinary programs? Are they doing SEL at the same time they're expelling children on a regular basis? That would not be called a positive school-wide culture. And then there's the issue of reaching out and making sure that we're working effectively with families and caregivers. We're developing authentic partnerships where parents are partners in this process. And then we have the larger issue of aligning learning opportunities with the community. That might be preschool programs for younger children. It might mean after school or out of school programs during the rest of the day. It could be working with other community agencies, sports teams, etc., and more broadly with the community from a policy standpoint. How are we going to make our communities places that are caring, loving places where all people feel that they are respected and they belong? That's the big picture. So there's a bunch of components then for systems change. There's obviously evidence-based explicit SEL curricula in the classroom. There's integrating SEL with other curricula, like with literacy or science or math. Very important is a focus on adult SEL. As one superintendent pulled me aside in the bathroom after one meeting, he said to me, the problem is not the kids, it's us. If we get ourselves together and we are able to get along better and demonstrate these skills ourselves and work together as adults in a warm, loving community, that's probably the most important issue that he saw. Of course, we want to focus on a common language that's used all across the school in special classes, on the playground, if you have buses, on the buses or wherever. We want to build climate and culture of the school so that both students and teachers feel they belong to a place that is innovative, caring, and productive. We want to have healthy partnerships with parents. We want to be able to assess these outcomes over time so that we can continuously improve. And those are really important components of systemic change. So, Subbu, I don't know if the document that I reviewed in December is being handed out at this conference, but that document talks about Accelerate, the Learning Curve Foundations model, and it has many of these components in it already. And in a sense, the Learning Curve Foundation is very systemic in its conceptual model, and it is very exciting to see that, because many times we see only one component, only assessment or only a curriculum. And in the Accelerate model, there's the Lead Well component, which is a framework for teachers and their own development. There's the Ready for the World, the curriculum for students in the classroom. There's the Catalyst framework, which is for the school level practices and policies. There's the Connect work, which is on a framework for working with parents. And there's assessment devices that Subbu Gayatri and the team have developed to look at both the processes and the outcomes across these different levels and across time. So we can assess how we're doing, what we need to improve, and then support those assessments over time to see if improvements are actually happening. Evidence-based outcomes. So I'm interested in creating a caring school and a loving world in the same way that Nemo talked about, but I can't sing like he can. But there's a couple components I think are really important here. The first is that both children and adults need emotion regulation skills. That's the most important thing, is the ability to regulate our emotions effectively. And of course, that has a lot of components inside of it. We have to first be able to recognize our emotions, not only in order to regulate them. We know that the emotion regulation skills are pretty independent of what we'd call normal cognitive intelligence. You probably know lots of really smart people that don't manage their emotions very well. And you probably know a lot of people that never have finished high school, never finished secondary school, who are loving, caring people that can well regulate their emotions. So we want to make sure that we understand this is not just a matter of cognitive ability. It's much more than that. It's in the heart. And at the level of schools, we need to adapt practices that create shared communities of caring, of healthy norms, and of a safe environment, especially these days when everyone is concerned about the quality of schooling. This can include high-quality SEL skills. As I've mentioned, it can include mindfulness skills. I think for teenagers, I have less hope for the sole use of mindfulness skills for children. I don't think they're going to be terribly effective alone by themselves. I think learning to express caring and gratitude is very important for all of us. And for children as they get older in the secondary schools, service learning to do things that are actively help them support their community and feel the feedback of what it means to do good. But all of this requires one important thing, and that is principal leadership. At the level of the building, the principal is the most important person, and she or he sets the tone for all of these things, for emotion regulation skills, for creating shared communities, for expressing caring and gratitude, for creating a curriculum or supporting a curriculum that can do all this work. And this requires systems planning. And that's why thinking about systemic SEL is important. So in the classroom, we think about it as a three-legged stool. We think that it's very important we have explicit SEL instruction, and the meta-analysis I mentioned earlier illustrates the importance of that. We need a supportive classroom environment, a classroom which supports everyone, is culturally responsive, is developmentally appropriate, is focused on building a sense of a family in the classroom, where children are empowered by shared agreements that they agree to, and it sets a tone of equality in a classroom. And I don't know if you can remember back to classrooms in which your teachers were loving, caring, and great listeners and created a sense of community. I hope you had at least one of those in your childhood. But you can remember lots of classrooms in which that wasn't the case, in which teachers thought that the best way to manage children was to be harsh and to be didactic and controlling. And lastly, we want to integrate SEL with the rest of instruction. And we can do that in every capacity, from health education to literacy to science and math, social studies, etc. Now, there are lots of evidence-based programs. Accelerate through Learning Curve is one example of, I think, a strong conceptual program. But there are many programs that have been carefully tested, and both CASEL has guides that you might be interested in if you're interested in broadly in the field, for both childhood, middle, and high school programs. And also there's something in America called the Blueprints for Healthy Youth Development that has very strong criteria for saying that programs actually work. But it's one thing to have a program that looks like it works in a randomized trial, and it's another thing to have a program work in the real world on an everyday basis. And what's most important, not only is that we use explicit curriculum that have those safe criteria, that has evidence of its effectiveness, but we need to understand the right conditions for it to thrive in a school. Because I can tell you, I've seen excellent programs completely fail in the wrong conditions, and that's bad for public policy. So I've learned a lot about this over almost 40 years now of doing these programs, and doing them not only in the United States, but in Pakistan and Iran and Australia and China, many different places. And across these many experiences, the first thing that is important is that fidelity matters. And by fidelity, it means really following the program as it was planned. But that does not mean that we don't make changes. We always want to make local changes to fit the culture and the context of a community, of a country, or of just a school building. We know the best outcomes are associated with those practitioners that have high fidelity. They are creative also, of course, in making the right kinds of adaptations, but they keep fidelity to the central and core issues in the curriculum. And that high fidelity results from careful attention to implementation. There is little hope, I must say, almost no hope, that handing teachers a curriculum or giving them an hour or two of training is going to lead to high fidelity. High fidelity means we want to plan systemically. We want to give the right kind of initial training, but we want to give ongoing consultation and technical assistance to teachers and principals, because programs evolve over time. And we always say that the first training should never be the last training. So SEL programs and practices won't grow or germinate in the wrong situation. Training and ongoing support are really critical. Teachers' buy-in, knowledge, and skill are essential. So we want to think of from the beginning about how we introduce programs and make sure that teachers feel that they are involved in the decision and that they buy into the process, because any kind of change in schools is often traumatic. And lastly, principal leadership is key. So I've been spending a lot of time the last 15 years or so on the teachers themselves, on educators and social emotional learning. And I have to admit, I don't know much about the context in India, except I know that in public schools there are many stresses for teachers, including low salaries, a lot of absenteeism. I'm familiar with the issues that occur. But in most places in the world, and I assume it's the same in India or worse, there is a serious crisis of teacher retention. In the United States, teaching is now rated as the most highly stressful profession, along with nursing. And this was before COVID. We know we need to support teachers' own social emotional learning and their professional growth. Teaching is a profession, just like being a lawyer or a doctor. And if you talk to teachers that have been teaching for 10 or 15 or 20 years, they'll say something like, oh, it wasn't until my 8th year that I really figured out how to be a great teacher. And I'm still learning now. So we need to think about how we create the context for teachers to grow professionally. And part of that is their own social emotional development. So we've been doing work with teachers on their own well-being and how we can support teachers' own SEL and their well-being. We've done 6 randomized trials now that have shown that we can increase teachers' well-being and their enjoyment of teaching. And there's a number of different programs that have been used. So let me start with a poll for you. I can't do actually a real poll today, but I'll ask you these questions and I hope you're saying yes. Are educators with better social and emotional skills more likely to succeed? I hear lots of yeses coming across the screen. Is it important for educators to take time to take care of themselves and to nurture their own well-being? And I hope the answer to that one's yes. And will educators be better prepared for their career and life if their social emotional skills are nurtured throughout their careers, starting in their pre-service and their teacher training? And I hope you would say yes to that. And if that's the case, then how can we do this? How can we, whoops. I think I just lost you. Can you see this? Subu, are you there?
Mark, yes, we can see you and we can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. Then how can we ensure that educators' social and emotional skills are nurtured throughout their careers? Because we're never going to get to the point where we're going to build systemic SEL and the kind of caring schools that have high expectations for students' achievement at the same time, unless we work on nurturing the development of teachers themselves. And so a colleague of mine, Tish Jennings, and I developed a model called the pro-social classroom. And you can see it on the right end in the green. The outcomes we want are students having positive social and emotional and academic outcomes. And we know that's more likely when we see the purple, that we see healthy classrooms. And that's the result of teachers having positive, loving, caring relationships with students, teachers having good management skills, and teachers effectively implementing social emotional curriculum. But what does that depend on? That depends on the teacher's own social emotional skills and well-being. And you all know yourselves that we have good days and bad days, and when we're not feeling very well, we don't do very well at work, and it's the same for teachers. So over the last 15 years, we've developed and tested a program called Care for Teachers. It's part of the nonprofit I chair called Create for Educators. And this is a program for teachers intending to improve their well-being by increasing their mindfulness, their positive emotion, and their enjoyment and efficacy of teaching, and decreasing their burnout and their negative and depressive affect. Usually it's done as a 3-day model, 2 days of retreat before the school year begins, and a day in the fall, usually a booster in the spring. But because of the pandemic, the program's adapted and it's being taught online to places all over the world in a very different way, of course, through Zoom. There are 3 main program elements we found are really important for teachers. One is to teach them some mindfulness practices, but that does not mean that we expect teachers to sit on a pillow for 10 or 20 minutes or a half hour. Instead, we teach them very simple practices that are in the moment. Deep breathing, how to set an intention, how to be centered in the classroom, how to have a presence and walk mindfully. We teach them a lot about emotional awareness and their own triggers for emotions with children in the classroom that deal with anger and fear, sadness. And then we teach them some mindfulness skills, if you want to think about them, as empathy and compassion training. We call it a caring practice. And lastly, we teach them mindful listening, how to really deeply listen from the heart instead of listening in order that you can respond by giving a solution. We've done this in multiple studies in rural and urban America, in the Bronx, in New York City, in Zagreb, in Croatia. And in all 3 randomized trials, we see the same kinds of positive effects, that it lowers teachers' perceptions of their own stresses. It increases their efficacy in teaching. They feel less rushed. They have less time urgency, in spite of the fact that we've done nothing to change their schedule, their daily schedule. We see lower rates of depression and anxiety, them reporting greater compassion for both themselves and others. And we've seen lower rates of physical symptoms of stress, because we know that stress gets under the skin and affects health. And lastly, in a large study in New York, we've actually observed the teaching in 225 classrooms before and afterwards, and showed that it improved the quality of teachers' actual pedagogy. We've actually followed up the New York teachers a year later, so 1.5 years after they've done the training, and we still see continued benefits in reductions in psychological stress, improvements in their own sense of mindfulness, and in their ability to adaptively regulate emotions. So I think there's a really important investment that we should consider in thinking about how we deeply support teachers. And that doesn't mean that that we want to victimize teachers. That is, teachers are not the problem in that sense. I don't want to get the wrong idea. The problem is not the teachers, it's our system. And the changes in systemic SEL are important. But one change that supports teachers is by helping them build their own awareness. Leadership is also a big issue, and we've done the same kind of work now with head teachers and principals, different places around the world. And we can say the same thing about a model for principals. We have a student outcomes again in green on the right. We want to have a healthy school climate, not just a healthy classroom climate. And that has to do with healthy principal and staff relationships, a healthy organizational culture in the school, effective principal community relationships. And what does it depend on? It depends on what's in the dark blue on the left. And that's the principal's own social and emotional skills and well-being. If we don't have people that are well in leadership positions, and we don't have people that are well in the classroom, how are we going to build the kind of community and society that we're focused on as a goal? So this principle says, my survival kit, it's a meditation tape, aspirin, and rose-colored glasses. And surely that is not enough to help principals survive. And in the US and other countries, I don't know research in India, there's even more turnover at the level of head teachers or principals than there is in the classroom teachers, because principals often find this job so stressful, a 24/7 job that's very lonely. So how do we become more systematic in our thinking? There's lots of ways to do this. As a founder of Castle, I'll tell you just a little bit. There's a school guide that's free at schoolguidecastle.org, which is a guide on how a school can formulate a team that can move forward to do that. The goal is to provide recommendations and tools to help schools achieve that systemic approach to school-wide SEL, coordinating classroom, school, home, and community. And it's written for teams. So schools develop school-based teams. They have teachers, maybe support teachers, possibly parents. And then they move forward using that guide through the steps of building systemic SEL. And they do that by a variety of ways, including building awareness, commitment, and ownership in their building with their teachers, helping the school establish a shared vision and plan, cultivating adult SEL, promoting evidence-based curricula in the classroom, and using data for continuous improvement. And I would say this pretty much captures what the Learning Curve Foundation has been doing on its own. We talk about 10 indicators of making systemic SEL, or what we call school-wide SEL. You've seen me already mention a number of these: explicit SEL, integration. One I haven't mentioned yet is youth voice and engagement, and this becomes particularly important by the time children are entering secondary school. Supportive discipline is important. What is the standard and style of discipline? Is it one that's restorative and helps children to repair the damage they've done, or is it just punishment? We want to integrate supports across a continuum for children that have more serious mental health problems. And as you can see, the other things I've mentioned: family partnerships, community partnerships, and data for continuous improvement. When we have all these things in place, to some degree at least, we're not going to get them all in place. It's a process over time. But we can go through a rubric right now in our schools, and we can think, have we started on each of these? Have we made any progress? What's the next step? And continue to use a continuous improvement system to monitor how well we can improve in each of these 10 indicators. It takes time. I think it takes 3 to 6 years between exploring, starting to install some of these ideas, doing some initial implementation and getting feedback from your data, all kinds of data, to see what needs to be changed, moving to full implementation and sustainability. It's a process over time. People want a quick fix. They would like to see a curriculum that they can install tomorrow with 1 hour of Zoom training, and this is going to solve the problem. But we know from experience all over the world that this is not the solution. The solution is to think more broadly, more deeply, and more long-term. So what are the implications for practice and policy as I wrap up? Social emotional learning works. It includes positive outcomes, including achievement outcomes, and that's important from a policy standpoint in terms of what state governments want. It has outcomes that are true across grades and across contexts in very different kinds of schools. It's doable. Well-trained teachers show strong outcomes. And teachers want SEL. You might be interested in Googling it sometime, The Missing Piece, which is a survey of teachers in the US, but teachers in other countries say the same thing. They want the skills to build the kinds of caring classrooms that encourage achievement. And SEL is a good economic investment, and that's one reason why it's grown so much in many countries in the last few years. But it needs support. It requires strong leadership and quality professional development. It needs effective planning to lead to effective implementation, and requires greater support by both federal and state policies. And I'm sure in India you have the same issues of both at the federal level and at the state level of how you get policymakers to see this as critical and essential as a part of schooling. So just to end with a vision of social emotional learning for our classroom, our school, our province, our nation, our world. The vision is educators, students, families, and community members work together to support healthy development for all children. All children are engaged and active learners who are self-aware, caring, respectful, good decision makers. And students are contributing in positive ways to their schools and communities, because in the end, the goal is to build strong citizenship in an active democracy. And if anything that points to the need for this, it's what's happened in the United States just in the last few days. That democracy is fragile, that caring for others that are different than you is fragile, and we need to make sure we build the kinds of citizens that have the skills to appreciate, respect, and honor all people. So just to end with a holistic picture, some people think that this problem is just about social emotional skill development, but it's not. It's about creating these effective conditions for learning and norms of caring, and we can't leave out teacher and administrator well-being and awareness. It's when we have these three things together that we begin to build a kind of holistic, caring, systemic school that I think everyone yearns for. So there's a couple essential questions every community, I think, has to answer that will lead them, I think, to this place. What do we want our children to become, to know, and to be able to do when they graduate? And how can the entire community be organized to ensure that all students reach those goals? So I'll end here with keeping calm and showing compassion, especially in these deep, dark periods that we're experiencing around the world with COVID and other issues. And Subbu, if we have time for some questions, I'd love to, or just thoughts, I'd love to discuss them.
Yes, thank you, Mark. We do have time for questions. We have about 5-7 minutes easily for questions. I think I can see a question come up on my panel here. So I request the audience, if you have a question, you could sort of, so there's one question that Asha has asked. I'll just read out the question for you, Mark. How does SEL integrated in curriculum bring in more benefits than just standalone SEL curriculum?
Well, I think first of all, it's very important, especially in the elementary school years, to have standalone curriculum, because there are skills that need to be taught, just like we teach skills in reading or in math. There are social emotional skills that we know need to be taught explicitly, and we need to be covered in a developmental order. At the same time, it's important to integrate that too, because we don't want teachers to teach SEL as if it's one chunk of the day, and then when they get to reading stories, for example, they don't explore what's most important in those stories, which is how people felt, what their goals were, how they faced conflict, and how they resolved it. Or let's think about social studies. Let's think about what's going on politically in India, or think about what's going on in the United States right now, or any country. What's happening? What are the perspectives of people that feel differently? Why do they feel that way? How do we go about learning how to resolve conflict with people that are different? How do we learn to respect people that have very different views than our own? That is something we are integrated in social studies. A wonderful example of that is a middle school curriculum called Facing History and Ourselves, which explores the Holocaust, the Civil Rights Movement, and other issues in which children learn about the different perspectives that occurred in those historic events, and then they think about how it relates to their daily life in their own neighborhood and community. Climate change is a perfect example. I've been working with international baccalaureate schools on systems thinking and climate and compassion. How do we think about the problem? Let's take an example of a problem that the high school students might deal with, which is water. Water is a concern. People talk about it as the new gold. And water is something that's we're going to need to do a much better job of conserving in order to survive. And having children explore all the aspects of water, where it comes from, how it's used, how we can change that use, and doing that from a point of compassion and understanding all the perspectives in the situation is a perfect example of doing social emotional learning, but doing it in a science curriculum. So while we need explicit skills, and those are true also in high school. So for example, we know that there's way too much sexual violence going on in our high schools. And I know that's been an issue in India. It's an issue everywhere in the world. How do we help students in the 14 to 16, 18-year-old range learn how to carry on the relationships without violence, with love and caring? So explicit SEL skills, as Oscar Wilde once said, only the naive know themselves. And that is until our last day on this earth. We will still be working on our own social and emotional development. And there are skills for us to learn and practice and do better at, all of us, throughout our lives. And so while we can integrate it in some areas, we also want to think about these explicit skills at each age that are most developmentally appropriate.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mark, for answering that question. I had a couple more questions here. I'm just going to pick one. Shweta, I know you're here from Key Ed, and you would have posted a question there. If you want to ask that question directly to Mark, if you can just use the raise hand feature, I can hand you a mic and you can actually ask that question directly if you want to do that. If it's not too much trouble. There we go. I have a raised hand. And Shweta, I'm handing you the mic now.
Hi, I'm assuming I'm audible. Yes. Hi.
Yes, very, very audible. Go for it.
Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for shedding light on just taking a systemic lens to this. I know I've had multiple conversations with everybody just saying, how do we look at it as a system, everybody, and especially look at educators and school leadership when we talk about SEL. So I think today was very enlightening. Not to take up too much time, so I had a quick question more around, I work in the early years with 3 to 6-year-old children, and we've been keenly looking at what SEL can be for them. And I've gone back and forth on my personal opinions on bringing in context when we talk about curriculum for explicit instruction of social and emotional development skills for the early years. So I just wanted to know your take on how important it is for us to create contextual curriculum in terms of language, the experiences of the children in the early years, versus picking up really high quality, excellent curriculum that has been created, but probably not with context, an Indian context primarily in mind.
Well, I think that in the Indian context, any cultural context is important. And I know that if I'm in Tamil Nadu, it's going to be very different than I'm in Uttar Pradesh. So that I know that India, like America, is a very diverse country with not only language but cultural differences that are very important to respect. So any curriculum that we would use, even if it's developed in Delhi, is going to look different when it's in than Chennai than when it's in Goa. And so any curriculum is going to need contextual adaptation, even if it's Indian. Now, saying that, I think that there is some value in developing curricula in each country. But what we'll see, and I think we can see that in the curriculum, for example, developed by Learning Curve, that I would say that 90% of what's in that curriculum is culturally consistent across any culture. because it's about the developmental process of how the brain is organized. And I didn't talk about neuroscience today, but how we acquire these skills. Now, how important, for example, language is in early childhood. And there's lots of good evidence to show that that if we compare just a really good early childhood class to a really early good childhood class that adopts an SEL curriculum that's well done, that we'll see more improvements in children's outcomes when that SEL curriculum is added. And my colleagues, for example, have just published a study which was on low-income American children in Head Start. Head Start's a very good program, but they included an SEL curriculum integrated with pre-literacy, and they've now just published an article which is 12 years later, when the children are almost graduating from high school, showing there are still effects of having that preschool curricula, of teaching those explicit skills all the way through high school. Great question.
Thank you so much for that.
I think we have time for maybe one more. There are a couple of interesting questions here. So this is a question from Jyoti Ravichandran from Thrive Foundation. Jyoti, I don't know if you're in the audience. I'm going to read the question out very quickly. Castle published a study reporting that about 85% of school leaders and teachers believe that SEL is important. Jyoti is asking what reasons may be there for the other 15 or so who may not have considered important, and are there any lessons for folks working here in India?
So it's a really good question. It does show, of course, that most people feel it is, and what you see is that the percentage of leaders, principals who don't think it's very important are almost always at the high school level. And I don't know if you know how high schools are organized in America, but I think it's somewhat similar, but a bit different than in India. They are very driven by achievement tests. Teachers work in departments. So instead of in elementary schools, teachers work at a grade level where all the teachers in the same grade work together. They know all the kids really well because they're with them most of the day, and they really develop relationships. But in high schools, kids move from class to class. And the science teachers spend time with science teachers, and the math teachers spend time with math teachers. They think about themselves as departmental specialists. And when that happens, there's no systemic SEL going on in the school because the whole child is not being considered as the unit of education. And it's usually in the high school conditions in which we see principals seeing it's not very important. And I think one reason is because they don't know how to even begin. They don't know how to begin to do this. And we don't have many very good models of how this is done still in secondary conditions. Excellent question. And it's a big challenge. We know that SEL is much easier to do, not necessarily more effective, but easier to do in the kindergartens and in the elementary schools. And as we get to junior high or middle school, as we call it, it's a little bit more difficult. And in high schools, it gets more complicated.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for answering that question. We're kind of short on time, so maybe a good idea to sort of close the session. But I think a couple of things that really stood out for me, Mark, I think is one where you said, that it's not the kids, it's the adults for the problem. I think we do need to look at that. And the other points that you really made about the fact that individual components by themselves may not really be as effective in solving the larger problem. And it's like almost saying the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's really the view that you gave us today, and that's I think really important for almost any education system around the world, and more so for India, I would like to think. So thank you, Mark, for those great insights today. Really grateful that you took the time. I know it's late. So but thanks for that anyway.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be with you all. I wish it was face to face, and I'm excited that you'll hear from Molly next, who has got wonderful experience in doing this kind of work.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. I'm going to end the session, so please feel free to take a table if you'd like. So, yeah, thank you. Okay, welcome back, everyone. And again, we have a fantastic speaker, Dr. Molly Lawler, coming all the way from Canada today. Again, I won't spend a lot of time on a more formal introduction, but Molly was introduced to us, connected by Mark, and over the last few months, Molly has been kind enough to review a lot of our work, to offer some very sharp insights, feedback, and perspectives on the components of our program. And I think it's always been a great experience in a conversation with her. And we always come away after a conversation with something that says, we could think about it like that. So I think it's always been a great experience. And thank you so much, Molly, for agreeing to join us today and sharing your insights on SEL and readiness to learn. So with that, I think over to you for the next 20, 25, 30 minutes or so.
Okay, great. It's really lovely to be here, and I'm just going to make sure everyone can hear me. Yes, good.
Molly, yes, the audio will be just fine. So once you start sharing your application window, I'll hide myself and the audience will see you.
I am going to find my PowerPoint, and okay, everybody see that? Okay, good.
Yes, Molly, go ahead.
Perfect. Okay. So I'm really thrilled to be here today with you all on your morning and my evening. I'm in British Columbia, Canada, and today I'm going to be speaking about enabling readiness to learn with social and emotional learning. And my background is I've been involved with program development for a number of years now in the field of social and emotional learning. Also thinking about contemplative education alongside SEL. And I'm just getting my slideshow the way I want to see it. And sorry, just make sure that my tech is working. So will you just let me know if there's any issue on your end? This is the first time in this platform. We did test it. I know we tested it.
Murphy's Law sometimes, Molly, so that's about
it. Okay. So what I'm going to be speaking about today is...
Molly, sorry, we lost the screen share.
Is it?
We lost the screen share. We can't see the presentation now.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Is that working? Okay, I'm going to escape and see if this works. I'll try again. Sorry about that. Okay.
Yes, we can see your screen. Maybe you'd like to just put it on slideshow.
Yeah.
Maybe a full screen.
Yeah, I'm going to try to do... that's what I did. I'm not too sure why that's happened. Okay. Is that working now? Okay, great. Perfect. Okay. So what I'm going to speak about today is talking about the importance of social and emotional development and kind of zoom in on the early years a little bit, how social emotional learning supports learning readiness, and then kind of also take a deeper dive into 3 areas of focus. Mark really did a brilliant job of setting this up for me in his keynote, looking at the students, the adults, and the context in the classroom. And so I'm going to start with a question to consider for you all. And I'm wondering, what matters more for school and life success? Is it more important your IQ or your EQ? And your EQ meaning your emotional intelligence. And I thought of a way to do a poll for this. So if you think it's IQ, you can press the little light bulb, and if you think it's EQ, press the heart emoji. And most of you probably are leaning towards EQ. And so some of you may have heard of Goleman, or Dan Goleman. He's a psychologist and also is a founder of Castle, along with Mark. He wrote, he's written quite a lot about this, about, that we know that our analytical intelligence isn't really all that responsible for our job success and other real world outcomes. It's really our ability to get along with others, to work in groups, to cooperate. And we're seeing this being appreciated in companies and hiring. When you go out and you apply for jobs, companies and human resource departments are starting to actually look for emotional intelligence in their candidates, because they need people who can solve problems in creative ways. They need people that can work with one another and solve conflicts peacefully. So SEL is really, really critical for all of our success, and our young people in particular. So when I think about or talk about social emotional learning and development in the early years, what I mean by that is really helping to develop the capacity of young children to form close, secure, and supportive adult and peer relationships, to be able to experience and express and regulate a full range of their emotions. And so Mark spoke a little bit about this, and with that comes to be able to self-regulate your behavior to achieve your goals. And to be able to explore and learn from their environment. And we know that, our early life experiences can have lasting and profound effects on our mental and physical health throughout the trajectory of our lives. And, early stress, adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, have been, really found to be very predictive of problems later on. Now, the good news is that we know that some of this can be mitigated by positive interventions, positive connections with other, and positive, healthy relationships. So we know, also that social emotional development isn't just about the individual. It's really about this interplay between both the individual factors like our genetics and our temperament, what we come into the world with, and also our environmental factors. So how supportive our home environments are, and how supportive our school environments are. Also, our early schooling. So it's really this interplay between the individual and their environment that shapes their social and emotional development. One theory that I think is really interesting that's come out, over the last number of years, Dr. Tom Boyce has spoken quite a lot about this, is this idea of our biological sensitivity to context, and this notion of dandelion and orchid children. And so when you think about the two plants, the orchid and the dandelion, orchids need really specific conditions to grow and to blossom and to thrive. Whereas dandelions kind of can grow anywhere. You see them in the smallest little tiny crack in the pavement with really poor soil quality, and they still seem to manage to survive. And think about this, we're talking about these two different types of plants, and we think there's two different types of children. So if you have an orchid child, that child may be very sensitive to their context, and they may need a very specific nurturing context in order to bloom, but they may have the most beautiful skills and abilities, but they really need a very supportive and nurturing context. Whereas a dandelion child may be somewhat more resilient to their context and not need so much support, perhaps, but maybe not shine quite as much as the orchid. So it's an interesting sort of metaphor to think about. And I think, if you think in your own life, you may recognize some dandelions and orchids, or in yourself, sort of a tendency towards one or the other. And I think the important thing here is to think about how, as adults, we're looking at how we're providing these contexts to kids so that they can thrive and grow and give them the sort of nourishment and fertilizer and water and all of those things that they need to be their best selves. So we've seen this already once this evening from Mark, and I'm going to come back to it and go a little bit deeper into these 5 areas of social and emotional learning, specifically thinking about young children. And so this is an area. I'm also a mother of two girls, and so I've been going through this developmental process in my own home, and in developing programming for young children as well. And Learning Curve, I will say, has done a spectacular job of really setting up their framework to acknowledge the developmental steps and appropriateness of what we want to be teaching across these different competencies. So thinking about self-awareness, the ability to understand our emotions and our strengths and limitations and have a growth mindset. When we think about young children, it's beginning with how do they understand their emotions? How do they recognize what they're feeling? And so for in an earlier situation, I would start with, helping them identify in the body, how do you feel when you're feeling upset? Are you feeling it in your tummy? Are you feeling your shoulders hunch up? Getting them to kind of identify those sensations and then making those connections with the feelings. For the adults, this is all relevant to all of us throughout our all of human development. And so for the adults in the room, the self-awareness piece is it's actually articulating your own emotions in front of children in a developmentally appropriate way, so that they're starting to gain that language and that literacy of understanding the different terms for the different kinds of feelings. And when you're going through something, or as a family or as a parent going through, what does it feel like when you're frustrated, or what does it feel like when you're happy, and really expressing those for kids. Self-management is, being able to regulate your emotions and your behaviors to achieve your goals. A lot of times people hear the term self-regulation or self-control. These are sort of related terms. But for young children, this is a big one. This is really where we think about a lot. And, we think about toddlers, and, they're known for their temper tantrums because they don't have their, brain development isn't there yet to really fully regulate emotions. But this is where we begin with young children, is helping them, really first with self-awareness, identify what am I feeling, and then self-management. Okay, what am I going to do now? And, in programming that I've been involved with, it's just maybe simply these, I call them pre-mindfulness skills, is just taking a deep breath, how to regulate physiology just through deep breathing, or seeking out co-regulation with an adult. This is a really key piece for the adult, being able to be with the child and understand that the child isn't developmentally ready to do that on their own. They need somebody there with them to coach them and to take deep breaths together. And then social awareness is really, being able to understand the perspective of another, show empathy for others. And for young children, this begins with, this is starting those skills to become, in the next one, relationship skills, to become a good friend, being able to understand, how does the child next to me want the same toy as me, and how are we going to work this out? I think for young children, literature is such a fabulous tool. I know many of you listening are probably nodding your head, using stories and really calling out, what do we think this character's feeling right now? Would you feel the same way? And then moving into relationship skills, for young children, it's learning how to be friends, learning how to share, learning how to navigate those early friendships. And for the adults, it's about modeling this. Modeling is such a key thing for the early years. If you have a staff together, modeling cooperation, modeling together, getting kids in dyads and working together, even role play using puppets. All of these sorts of things are really important ways that we can model and teach kids, again, this explicit teaching of how do we be a good friend, and how do we also solve our problems in peaceful ways. And just, I know Mark mentioned this about, avoiding punitive discipline. And in the early years, it's a beautiful time to really start with restorative practice and getting kids involved with, if there has been a little tussle over a puzzle or a game or something, how do we work together to repair that relationship so that it's really normalized? This is how we are together. Yes, we are going to have our disagreements, but then how do we come together and solve them in a peaceful way? And then responsible decision making, Mark spoke about this, and making ethical and responsible choices and understanding the consequences of our behavior. So for younger children, it's about how do I stay safe? What are those decisions that I need to make to stay safe? So for little ones, it's, staying on the sidewalk and not going outside without an adult, or, these sorts of things. So that would be what I would suggest to focus on around SEL for the early years. And so one thing that's really exciting is that we know that social and emotional skills are malleable. They can be taught, and that, explicitly taught. And Mark, to this, that it is important that we do this explicit teaching. As much as we know that children are, sponges and do absorb a lot of what we put out there, there is that important piece of where programs can serve that role, where they can provide developmentally appropriate, sequenced skill instruction that really is helpful for teachers, I think, because if a teacher is new to SEL and they don't know where to start, a program is a really great, an evidence-based program is a really great place to help them begin, and then you can go from there and integrate that learning into your instructional practice, and to be reinforcing these concepts in all throughout the day, as Mark mentioned. So again, we know that the goals of teaching the SEL skills are around helping kids recognize and manage their emotions, to form healthy relationships, and to make our responsible and caring and ethical decisions. And again, our world really needs this, having care for themselves and others, and putting themselves in that circle of care. Another area of research I've been interested in is around self-compassion, and I don't have time tonight to go too much into that, but I think that's an important piece as well, that we bring ourselves into that circle of care. And for educators and families and parents bring themselves into that circle of care is so important. It's important modeling for young kids. So neuroplasticity, and so I'm not a neuroscientist, but I do know a little bit about it. We know from the past, 10, 15 years or so that our brains are not fixed. So we used to think that, you grew up, you became an adult, your brain was then hardwired, and that was it. We knew that it was somewhat plastic in the early years, but now we know it's actually changing all the time, and our brain changes with experience. And in the early years, it is actually an enormous period of growth, and it's a really key time that we can make really positive change for kids and help them develop healthy habits of mind that through neuroplasticity. But there's hope for us all. So for those adults and thinking about the adult SEL, neuroplasticity can help us all too. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. And we know that, the research, Mark talked a little bit about this, that it really is predictive of success later in life. Here's a study that Mark was actually a co-author on, that followed kids from kindergarten, looking at their teachers rated their pro-social skills, so things like cooperation and listening and getting along with others, and then followed them up 13 and 19 years later and found that they were actually, those kids with higher social skills as rated by their teachers in kindergarten were doing better. So they were more likely to graduate from high school, they were more likely to get a college degree, they were more likely to have stable employment, and less likely to have more negative outcomes, like being involved with the police or having to be on public assistance. So it's a really important thing that we focus on the early years and social emotional development, because it does have that, and Mark talked about the cost benefit of that as well. So I want to quickly just talk about some potential barriers, or really one big barrier that isn't insurmountable, but we need to all be aware of, and that's the effect of toxic stress. And so we know that stress is really problematic for us all, but especially for young children and learning. I'm sure if you think about a time when you were stressed, you feel a little bit discombobulated. You can't, you put something down and you can't remember where it is. You're a little bit, your fuse is shortened. You have less patience. You're less able to focus and pay attention. And so you can think about the effect of that on a young child is profound. And so we know that, early stress can impair the development of self-regulation, which is so predictive of later success in life. It interferes with learning. It can cause behavioral problems. But the good news is that adult support can be protective. So again, it comes back to us as the adult to really provide that context of support, love, and nurturing to mitigate the risks of stress. So a couple of studies I'll just mention briefly that looked at this idea of stress contagion. Is stress contagious? We know that actually, yes, emotions are contagious. If you think of a time you've been with a really stressed out person, you start to catch it. You start to kind of be a little bit on edge. On the flip side, when you're with somebody who's really positive and exuding happiness, you start to that rubs off on you as well. So these effects have been shown in the classroom. There's one study in 2011 found that first grade students who were with teachers who reported higher levels of stress actually exhibited higher levels of internalizing and externalizing behavioral issues. And then a second study, which was out of UBC, where I am, Kim Schoner-Reichel and a colleague, Ava Oberle, looked at stress contagion, looking at teachers' level of burnout, and the stress hormone cortisol in students, and found that teachers who were self-reported higher levels of burnout or high occupational stress had students with more dysregulated morning cortisol patterns. So that was actually, getting under the skin of those kids compared to teachers who reported less occupational stress and burnout. So this is, pretty profound research that we need to be aware of and understand, the context really has such a significant impact on our young people. And so just quickly, talking about, again, the effects of stress on learning, we know that our brains function better when we're not in a stressed emotional state, when stress can impair important cognitive functions that are vital for learning and problem solving. These are called executive functions, and these are three core cognitive skills that start developing in the early years. Working memory, our inhibitory control, and cognitive flexibility. And these are housed in the prefrontal cortex, which is going under massive construction throughout early years in childhood and adolescence. These functions have been studied a lot over the last 10 to 15 years, and they are very predictive of outcomes. And actually, EFs are more predictive of academic success than IQ. Now, the problem is that these can be impaired by stress. And so a lot of my other work, I'm very focused on well-being. And well-being is, kind of part of this whole social and emotional world, because it's really important that our children are happy and know how to nurture their well-being and know how to have skills for self-care. And so why I bring this up with the executive functions is that we actually know from some science that our mood actually impacts our ability, our working memory, our cognitive flexibility, our attentional control. When we're feeling sad, we have poor attentional control. So if you have a child, in a classroom situation who is unhappy, feeling sadness, they're less likely to retain information. But on the flip side, when we're feeling happy, we have better cognitive flexibility, we're more creative, and we're more able to, solve problems and have divergent thinking. So it's really important that we are aware of our students' emotional lives, that we are prioritizing their education on their heart and soul. And we know, relationships are central. we are social beings. I think, this last year has really shone a light on this of needing to socially distance from one another, and how that has been very challenging. And certainly challenging for our youth. I know I'm speaking about young children now, but our teens and our adolescents who haven't been able to be together has been a challenge. And so, when you feel like you don't belong, or you feel like you're disconnected, that can actually impair your executive functioning as well. So this really underscores the importance of developing, those inclusive classroom environments that Mark was speaking about, those caring, nurturing places where everybody feels they belong, because that's really foundational for all learning. You have to feel safe and connected to your peers and your teachers. That sets the stage for being able to learn. So now I'm going to spend the last little bit here around how do we do this? How do we promote students' academic, social, and emotional skills? And there are three areas that is really critical, and Castle certainly speaks to this around, focusing on the context, as I've been speaking to, as well as Mark, SEL of students and the SEL of educators. And so focusing on the students, really thinking about young children, I think the first, where do we start? I'd say three things. So helping children first learn to recognize and manage their emotions, helping them to learn and recognize and solve social problems, and helping kids learn to be friends. So I spoke a little bit about this when I was going through the 5 Castle competencies on things that, what would be sort of developmentally appropriate here. And we know that, we need to start with the self-awareness of self-management, I think, because that sort of fits into everything else. If you can't, it's very hard to solve a social problem if you can't manage your emotions. So that's where I would suggest to start. And Dr. Dan Siegel, who has written prolifically, he's written a book. It came out a number of years ago, The Whole Brain Child, which I think is a really nice book for families and early childhood educators. And he talks about name it to tame it. And so it's this idea of when kids can actually put a label to what they're feeling, that actually reduces the intensity of that emotion. When you're feeling anger, it's just all consuming. But when a child has the word for it and can identify what that is, it helps them to then regulate it. You need to be able to name it, and then you can regulate it. And so emotion regulation, it's really being able to understand and balance our emotions. So it's beginning with that awareness of I'm even having an emotion. Sometimes we act without even recognizing what's sort of prompting our reactions. I think we can all kind of think of children that we've known or worked with who are hot-headed or quick to react. Being aware and being able to label can kind of help to extend that period for them so that they can make a better choice. As I've talked about, understanding and labeling emotions, and then managing our emotions to meet goals. So this is an ongoing skills that are built in the early years and continue to be practiced and practiced and practiced throughout our entire lives. And throughout development, as we get into middle childhood and into adolescence, we have mixed emotions and all of those things. So this is also critical throughout the entire lifespan. And so I think, I've talked a lot about this. I'm just going to quickly say, we know that this is a really important skill. And if kids don't develop these emotion regulation skills and they're dysregulated, we know it's a core feature of later problems and maladjustment. So I mentioned this a little bit about, where do you begin with young children? It's just about, giving them a library or a glossary of terms of all the different emotions, being able to help them identify where they feel their emotions in their bodies, and then start with simple techniques around how to manage them, those big emotions. And deep belly breathing, it can be really helpful. And again, all of this needs to happen in supportive and nurturing environments. And that co-regulation is key as well, having the adult there to help. And so here are just some examples of opportunities for kids to practice identifying emotions and understanding, what do I look like when I feel these different things, and really getting that into their regular vocabulary, and then pulling it into, if you're doing, circle time and reading a story, bringing it into that social awareness piece of what the characters might be feeling and what emotions might have been coming up for them. And the focus on the adult, of course, there's this adult at the front of the room often, which really sets the tone. And I'm not going to speak too much about this. Mark did a beautiful job talking about the model that he and Tish Jennings developed. But they are at the beginning of the room, and they really set the tone. And we know, from the science now around stress contagion, how critical that is. And Mark spoke about the research around the care program, and how that's been really exciting to see, things can change. And there was some other research came out in 2013, Nurbase Singh and colleagues, where they had preschool teachers actually take a mindfulness-based course. And they found, in addition to positive effects for the teachers, they found that the students had positive behavioral changes, which was really exciting, because the students didn't get the program. It was the teachers. So what that really indicates is that it's what we bring into the room has an impact on what happens with our students. So the other piece, I talked about modeling earlier. And so this is really, children need to witness these pro-social attitudes and behaviors. And, this is so critical. And I think, the other day in the United States, we saw sort of the opposite of this, of what happens when we have bad behavior and people get caught up and mirror that. I think a lot of people are regretting some of their behavior, but they were caught up in that moment. So we need to create this sort of pro-social value orientation by modeling and providing the opportunities too for kids to behave pro-socially and recognize how that feels good for them. And so finally, I'm going to just talk about the context briefly and how important that is. And I always come back to, if you do nothing else, relationships. That's the key foundational thing. We are social beings, and we need to feel connected. And so our students need to feel cared for and supported and connected. When we think about epigenetics and how we are the interplay between the individual and the environment, that supportive environment is so key, and it can be both promotive and also preventive for positive outcomes. And so we know, when kids feel like they belong in their school, they're more engaged, they have better academic outcomes, and they have higher levels of well-being, which are all really important things. We know, some more findings for you. Kids who are connected do better in school as well. They have higher grades, they have higher graduation rates, and also they're less likely to engage in risky behaviors because they are positively connected and have healthy relationships with members in their school community. So one of the things we have that I talk about it sometimes is helping kids meet their sort of fundamental needs for having. Mark talked about having a voice, feeling a sense of community, as I said, being valued by the learning community. Part of this can be accomplished by creating agreements. So having students be a part of, what do we want to feel like in this class? How do we want to behave with one another? Now, for young children, you might say, well, that sounds a little complicated. Yes. So for younger children, I would say, just allow them to have input on decorating their classroom. Maybe they're going to do some art and you're going to display it around the room. Many of you are doing this already, I'm sure. But just sort of identifying what are those sort of things that we can do to help them have a little voice, sharing in a circle. If they have a snack time, do they get to have a choice of what they're going to have out of some healthy options, hopefully? And then, of course, helping them to contribute to the community. And so this is important. Mark talked about service learning for older adolescents being critical, and that is. For younger kids, they can help bring the snack out. They can help put things away. They can help, if one child already knows how to tie shoes, they can help a younger child that doesn't know yet. So providing these opportunities for them to gain a sense of competence and to be contributors is really important. So my take-home messages for you today are to, provide students with instruction and skill building opportunities that foster their SEL and their well-being, and promoting adults. Social emotional competence is critical as well. And for when we're talking about this, I'll bring back that self-compassion piece again. We're not perfect, and we're not going to have, be the best educator every single day. We're going to have those times of stress, but being able to have that awareness of how we're feeling and to bring that compassion towards ourselves, I think is really important, and it's important modeling for our students. And again, just creating those caring environments and relationships with kids where they feel loved and nurtured and supported is key. So I want to just thank you so much for listening and for having me, Subbu. It's been a real pleasure and a real honor for me to follow Mark as well.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Molly, for such an insightful session. I'll open up the floor for questions. We have time for a couple of questions. So I'll open the floor for questions. Audience, you can either raise your hand or type in a question in the questions box, and we can moderate that. Questions doesn't have to be questions. It can be thoughts. It can be comments. Oh, we're reading a little bit in the chat box. What we bring in the room is what impacts the students. My takeaway says a gentleman, Divine from Ghana Education Service, is a teacher, and we know him well. So that was a great comment there. And certainly about the fact that there's a raised hand. Yay. Okay, here we go. And that's Gayatri's raised her hand, so I'm going to hand her the mic. Why am I not surprised?
Hey Molly, thank you so much for such a beautiful session. But what question I have is that while we're trying to teach something like this to younger children, helping them define their emotions, children also learn from what they observe and see around them. So when there is a conflict of situation, in the sense there is something that is being taught in the school and explained or modeled, but whereas when you come back home, the child sees something else, then how does a child perceive this conflict that is presented in front of him or her? How do you think what is it that they learn when they see multiple things that are different, but the situation is the same?
Oh, okay. So I'm just going to clarify. So you mean when they're seeing a response to a conflict in one way at school, in a different way at home?
Yeah.
That is challenging. And I think this really speaks to the need for systemic SEL that's inclusive of families.
Right.
And so I know that you are all doing this. And so I think it is problematic for young children to try to make sense of that developmentally, because they have, their ability to hold different perspectives is more limited. So yes, I think it would create a problem. Younger children are very much can hold one perspective. So I don't have a perfect answer. I think what I would say is the importance of including families and parents in this journey around social and emotional learning. And I know from your work that you're doing this through your Connect program. And so that there can be common language and common practice, because it is a huge issue if what we say and do in one place doesn't match in another. So you bring forth a real issue. And I would say for the field of social emotional learning, in my experience in Canada, trying to engage families can be hard. We have meetings and hold workshops, and the ones that come are the ones that need it the least. So we have, right? So this is a larger issue that I think we as a field need to become more creative. How do we reach families? How do we also invite them in and have conversations to find that again, contextualizing what we're doing in a way that's respectful to their views. And so one small tip that I would have would be to invite families in. Of course, it's hard to do right now, but through technology now, invite them into the classroom to participate in some, especially in young preschool or young elementary. Give them the opportunity to observe, be a part of some of the learning.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you. Yeah. Oh, Subu, your mic's off. Your mic is still off.
Oh, come on. Okay.
Oh,
Yes, third time's the charm. Third time's the charm, right? Molly, there was a request from Divine from Ghana asking if you could share some activities that educators can use to engage learners to learn about regulating their emotions. I think that's more of a sort of a curriculum slash activities kind of request. And if you have any resources or open source resources or references that you could pass on to us later, Divine will make sure that reaches you. Is that okay?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. And I will say that Learning Curve probably has some resources as well that I would include that. Yes, but I'm happy to.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, we'll do that. Great. I think yes, I think we've pretty much overshot our time a little bit. We're a little bit behind, but can't let you go without saying thank you so much for that insight. I think a couple of things that really resonated is the fact that you talked about how stress can be really difficult for children and how it can actually affect learning, right? And I think it's important in the education system for us to be cognizant of that, right? And ensure that there are a set of enabling conditions that allow children to learn in joy, right? And I think go beyond just the outcomes that we are used to about learning. I think going beyond that, I think there's some great insight there. So Molly, thank you so much for your insights. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for all your inputs, and we definitely hope that the conversation will continue. Love to keep engaging with you anyway. And yeah, before I so end the session, I think Gayatri, you're on stage, and that's for a particular reason, I suspect.
I don't know how to go back, Subbu. That's why I'm on stage.
No. I can't end the session. So if you were planning to do a little energy break for people, this is a good time.
Okay.
And
All right. Okay, let's take a little brain break, as we call it. Yes, I have a question for you all, and let's see how mindful all of you have been. And this is not from the sessions that Mark and Molly have had. So let's see how much of you remember from the time the session started. Nemo in his room had how many posters behind him, and what were the messages that were written on it? If you know the answer, type it on the chat box or raise your hand and tell it. I see a lot of smileys, laughing smileys. Come on, let's see.
is the music too much to be mindful of what was on the wall? Is that a big excuse or?
No, it's not. Come on. The question is, how many posters were there behind Nemo that were very obviously visible on the screen? And what were the messages written on them? Raise a hand.
We lost. I think we lost Gayatri there.
Yeah, hello everyone. Can you hear me?
Sanat, yes,
Yeah,
please respond.
yeah. I could notice six poster. Out of which I remember in one of them it was written "Be grateful" and "Be kind." These are the two posters which I remember. What was written on that?
Tried.
All right.
Well tried, Sanat, but number of posters were not six. Something about spreading love. No? Okay, quickly, just one more response and then I'll tell you the answer.
Uh, we have Alika from the University of Leicester saying 7 posters.
Okay. Uh, Anyone else? Want to give it a try quickly?
Everyone else has dodged the question around number and just put down the words.
So, honestly, okay, let me tell you the answer. There were about five, even I'm not sure, but I saw five. But the messages being be grateful, be kind, and throw your hearts up. So, yeah. Thank you so much. I hope that gave you all a good break, a little break that we all need, and then
Great. Thank you.
Subbu,
Thank you,
over to
Gayatri,
you.
for that little energizer. Molly, once again, thank you so much. I'm quickly going to end this session now. Again, Molly, please feel free. I know it's late for you, but feel free to stay back if you'd like. But we're going to start the next session in a couple of minutes, where I'm going to quickly share some key data from the Accelerate program that we've collected over the last 3 years or so. So give us a couple of minutes. Grab a coffee, everyone, if you'd like. But do come back. We've got 2 more exciting sessions after this one. So see you all in a couple of minutes. Hello everyone, welcome back. We are a little bit behind schedule, so I'm going to accelerate the spotlight that I was planning to present. I will take no more than 10 or 12 minutes, and the objective being that I'd like to be able to present some key data which the Accelerate program has generated over the last 3 years or so. So I'm going to quickly share my screen and get started. All right, so Accelerate is what we call an evidence-based systemic SEL program by Learning Curve. But when I say by Learning Curve, it essentially does not mean just us. It means every other organization who has partnered with us, who has supported us, every donor, every well-wisher, every person who has contributed to this program. In theory, in practice. So a heartfelt gratitude to everyone here and everyone who has worked with us to make this program what it is. Um, I'm going to quickly talk about very few things. Basically, what is the need for a systemic SEL approach for India? I know Mark and Molly have talked about this, so I don't want to spend a lot of time, but really focus on how Accelerate meets this need. And more importantly, show you all some key data, some field evidence that we've generated in the last 3 years. And of course, at the end, an invitation to you all to partner with us. Uh, the need for systemic SEL in India, I think, is as much as similar to like globally, right? I think, but in India, certainly you have multiple factors and influences on for the child. Uh, Sorry, I'm told my screen is not visible. Sorry, just give me a second, please. Sorry. So talking about the need for systemic SEL in India, just like any other part of the world, I think a child has multiple factors and influences coming from the family, coming from the school, coming from the community, and looking at each of these in isolation just won't help. And therefore, there is a great need to ensure that we recognize the interdependency of all of these environments and ensure that those factors and influences work in harmony together in togetherness. The second aspect is really around learning outcomes and what we are discovering through the field of research around what learning outcomes can actually mean and what more it needs to actually include, right? And we're also learning and we're discovering how learning itself or SEL and learning itself are very intricately connected and therefore cannot be dissociated with one another. And when you look at the interplay of all of this, essentially it clearly points to a need for us to look at social emotional learning not just as another subject maybe, but also as part of the system and also as part of what practice really means. And Mark's talked about this, Molly has talked about this. Again, a blueprint for systemic SEL would really look at teacher self-development, teacher well-being, teacher support, SEL curricula for classrooms, school policies and processes, parent engagement, and certainly assessing effectiveness, right? And that's really what Accelerate as a program is all about. I would go out on a limb to say basically that I think it's almost a first in class systemic SEL program for India. Much of our work around Accelerate has been drawn from essential research, and a lot of it has come from Castle's work. Uh, but we've put together each of these components in a structured manner, right from teacher well-being to student SEL curriculum to looking at school processes, looking at parent engagement and how that happens, and finally also around assessing effectiveness of the program. Uh, I know it's a busy slide, but the objective of this slide is just to show you that for each of these components, we've been able to develop a set of frameworks, standards, and indicators, and then be able to provide structured, explicit inputs and material to the schools, including ongoing support through a period of time, which makes it all the more sort of rounded in terms of saying that it's not a hit and run sort of program. So I'll leave that there. At Learning Curve, there's a mantra that we all sort of talk about, and we say, "In God we trust, but all others must bring data." So what I want to share with you is that Accelerate is not just a theoretical framework, but the program has been implemented across schools in India, across schools, particularly in the state of Telangana and AP, for the last 3 years. And what I'd like to share with you is that those key pieces of data now. Um, our assessment toolkit or assessment framework, which has come together over the last 2 or 3 years, again covers all of those components of systemic SEL. Uses a multiple tools, including observation-based tools, self-reported tools, surveys, focus groups, etc., and also looks at both the outcome as well as the process through a set of formative and summative tools. Uh, just sharing some numbers with you in terms of the reach and some of the demographics. 187 schools, 40,000 students who've been impacted through the program. And the data that I'm about to present to you, I'll just put a few caveats in terms of the methodology and certain limitations. The objectives essentially of the program or objectives of this whole idea was really around evidence generation and program iteration, so not necessarily done from a research lens. That's important to remember. The data that I'm about to present to you is essentially a meta-analysis of data from the last 3 years. We used a single group. We've not used a control group for comparison. The techniques used were observation, self-reported, and interviews. Several constraints in terms of the data that I wanted to put out there. One is that as certain tools changed or were refined over the last 2 or 3 years, there's certain data that we've not incorporated in this analysis. a lot of partner data that has not conformed to the tools. We've left them out. Teacher dropouts have obviously affected the data points that we were able to analyze, and certainly our last year's data has been affected due to the closure of schools. So what you'll see here in terms of a data set is a smaller sample of the overall reach of the program. So that's just something I want to put out there. But now we'll talk about some real data. So from the teacher program or lead well, uh, we analyzed percentage of teachers showing greater than a one level shift, not just some improvement, but a greater than a clear, tangible, greater than one level shift in key teacher SEL competencies. And what you'll see here across the board is basically that there is a reasonable improvement in teachers being able to recognize emotions and being able to manage their own strong emotions, being able to engage the child, being able to build trust, being able to be resilient in themselves and open to change and new ideas. From the ready for the world component, basically again we analyzed around 14,133 students, looking at a percentage of students again showing a greater than one level shift. And here when we say greater than one level shift, we mean in terms of their ability to demonstrate these skills more and more independently and more frequently. And if you look at again across the five competencies, we saw that children have improved in being able to understand their emotions, being able to manage their emotions or emotional regulation, being able to appreciate others' perspectives, the aspect of empathy, being able to handle conflicts, and also in terms of responsible decision making. In terms of catalyst, the school improvement, the school part of it, the school policies and processes, when we looked at the framework which is built around equitable and safe learning environment, engaging in participatory learning and authentic and trusting relationships, the data showed that 74% of the schools in the program showed improvement in that school SEL environment, and the overall improvement that they showed was around 23%. The Connect program for parents, basically we did semi-structured interviews with just a little over 3,000 parents. If you see the percentage of parents who are reporting that their children are now able to regularly demonstrate these behaviors at home, including showing self-appreciation, including sharing emotions, expressing their views, etc., it's a clear indicator of the fact that you can actually take social emotional learning home and make that difference. Uh, but the fact is, I think that tying all of this together is really a set of data that tells us that systemic SEL approach can work in the Indian context. So, for example, we're seeing an improvement in seeing explicit SEL instruction by teachers improve. We're seeing improvements in classroom engagement based on a set of observations. We're actually seeing close to 45% of the teachers using SEL practices in other subjects, in other classrooms, showing that it's going beyond one classroom and actually spreading to the rest of the school. And we're seeing close to 90% of schools actually allocating resources for SEL. And the most precious of them, all of the resources, is essentially time. And what I mean by that is that schools have actually carved out time in the daily school schedule for SEL, and that itself shows that there is a way for systemic SEL to work. But one very interesting piece of data that we've looked at is basically we've always asked this question: is there a link? Is there a causal linkage between teacher SEL, between teacher well-being, between teachers' own SEL and student SEL? And the data that we're showing here basically proves that there is. We saw a moderate to high correlation between teacher SEL and student SEL over the last couple of years, and this particular abstract was also published recently at the SEL Exchange. So what we're really trying to say here, I think, is that there is a way for systemic SEL to work, and the Accelerate program that we've developed and implemented over the last 3 years indicates that there is much more work to do. However, it also indicates that there are ways for us to bring this into the Indian context. And that's really where we are looking at going with it. I think the idea for us basically is by 2025, we'd like to be able to enable at least 3 states in India to adopt and effectively implement a systemic SEL approach. And that's really where I'd like to invite organizations in this audience, invite individuals, invite academics, researchers to partner with us. If you're with the government, we can partner with you to demonstrate and scale systemic SEL in your state. We can work with you on integrating SEL assessment with your current systems and be a knowledge partner for SEL curriculum and content. For other nonprofits, other international agencies, we can be a knowledge partner. We can work with you to layer systemic SEL on your existing programs. We can work with you on research partnerships. And of course, if you're from the venture philanthropy or CSR ecosystem, then please do partner with us to unlock this potential, enable us to build those scalable and replicable models for SEL, and essentially, I think, build salience for social emotional learning in India, which we so badly need right now. And that's all I have. Thank you for your attention and consideration. Each of you, each participant will also receive a more detailed booklet in terms of the framework, standards, indicators, and also some of the key data. So you will have an opportunity to read through that later on, and I'm hoping that that will spark off a set of conversations for all of us to be able to collaborate, to be able to bring SEL in a more systemic manner to the country. And I'll stop there. I don't think we have time for questions, but I can take a couple of quick comments. We're about 15 minutes behind, but I can take a couple of quick comments if anyone has any. Okay. I think what you will receive from us basically is a more detailed document, more detailed booklet on all of this. So once that reaches you, maybe we can spark off some conversations around how we can do this together. So thank you very much. I'm going to end this session and oh, there is a question that suddenly popped up. Oh, it's not a question. Jyoti says awesome. Thank you very much, Jyoti. Okay. And that was not rigged, by the way, so that's fine. All right, ending the session now, and we'll start our next session by Leslie Ardwin from Think Equal in just about a minute. Thank you. All right, welcome back, everyone, to our next session. And it's going to be very difficult for me to introduce our next speaker because her biography reads like a book. So you'll have to look her up on Wikipedia. But our speaker for the next session is none other than Leslie Ardwin. I think her accomplishments as a filmmaker are already legend, but I think what's more legend for me, and I think everybody at Learning Curve, is an astounding sort of journey and transition into the world of bringing social emotional learning in such a beautiful manner to the early years. And every time we've had a conversation with Leslie, we've come away completely energized. The kind of dogged determination that she has in making sure this happens is just completely beyond compare. So, Leslie, the floor is all yours. Please tell us more. And we have a very special announcement coming up at the end of the session with me and Leslie. So, Leslie, the floor is all yours.
So good morning, everyone. Namaste. Aap sabika swagat hai. I'm really honored to be with you here this morning. Ye mera saubhagya hai. I'm going to start off by asking a framing question for this session. And it's a question that I ask every education minister and policymaker who I encounter in my work to bring about a system change in education, which is what my work is all about. And particularly policymakers in early years education. The question is this: how can we, who have a duty of care to our youngest citizens, I'm going to pause a moment because I've just had notification that my video is off. So let me get back in to find the right button. Yes, indeed. I'm so sorry, everyone. At least I hope you've heard my greeting and letting you know absolutely how honored I feel to be joining Learning Curve and all of you. So I'm going back now to the question that I said I wanted to have as the framing question for this conversation that we're having. The question is this: we who have a duty of care to our youngest, most vulnerable citizens, how can we deem it to be compulsory for those children to learn numeracy and literacy, but it's optional for them to learn how to value another human being, how to have self-esteem, how to be a responsible global citizen, and how to lead healthy relationships? It's a rhetorical question, of course. Gandhi said, if we are to achieve real peace in this world, we shall have to start with the children. And I believe that with all of my heart. It is mindset change that is needed to bring about the safe, free, and equal world which we all dream of, but which is so sadly elusive, and I'm afraid getting more and more so. This is the only way that it can be achieved, is by a foundational early years education. I came to this, my life's mission, pretty late in life, I'm sad to say. I started off as a filmmaker, as Subbu mentioned, and for the last film I made, which was a documentary about a savage and brutal gang rape and murder of an extraordinary young woman, I interviewed rapists and murderers in jail for 31 hours. I sat and looked into their eyes in my inquiry as to what human beings these were. What kind of human being can do this to another human being? One of the rapists I interviewed had raped a 5-year-old girl. And he was very clear about what entitled him, in his terms, entitled him to do that. And I'm going to quote to you, word for word, exactly what he said to me in justifying his actions. She was a beggar girl, he said. Her life was of no value, word for word what he said. He told me this without a hint of remorse or regret. Her gender and her caste made him feel entitled to take that little person, do whatever he wanted with her, and then toss her aside a little heap of bloodied rags. Now, we label these perpetrators monsters. And we do that in order to distance ourselves from them. But the truth is, the sobering truth, is that not one of the men I sat with and interviewed was a monster. I wish they had been in some senses. It would have been much more reassuring. But no, these were ordinary, normal, young men who had been programmed like robots by socio-cultural thinking, with attitudes that allow and, yes, even encourage them to do what they did. And in case you think I'm overstating the case, let me tell you, word for word, what one of these rapists, actually more of the rapists said the same in different ways, but the clearest it was said to me was by one of the rapists, and it was this. She was out after dark. She was with a man who was neither her husband nor her brother. She not only deserved what she got, but we had a duty to teach her a lesson. That, my friends, is socio-cultural thinking at work, actively expressed. There's not one corner of this earth that is free of this disease. It just expresses itself in differing ways and to differing degrees, country by country. Whether it's the rape of 1 in 4 girls on college campuses in America, a country which hasn't even yet ratified the Equal Rights Amendment Act, or the fact that 96% of women in Egypt are genitally mutilated, or that in the UK, where I live, 1 in 3 girls between the ages of 13 and 17 have experienced sexual violence. And it goes on and on and on ad infinitum. In fact, the more it goes on, the more we become inured to it. It ceases to shock us anymore. So it gets normalized. This is a cycle of discrimination and violence. And how are we responding? Well, we're dealing reactively with the fallout to all of this. We're putting plasters on wounds instead of tackling it at its root. So I want us today to consider a missing and critical parallel path, a path of prevention and intervention, and especially at the crucial early years stages when these boys, when all of our children are developing their feelings, their thinking, their character, their moral compass, around the age of 3 to 6. That is when neuroscientists tell us the brain architecture is developing. And what we do at Think Equal with the program we've designed is we co-construct pro-social, positive, loving, empathetic neuropathways in the developing brain of our children. This is when the brain is optimally modifiable between the ages of 3 and 6. Now, obviously, up to 3, development is even more intense. But for 2 reasons we don't start below 3. First of all, a child's sense of identity and moral responsibility actually begin around 3. And secondly, we need to reach children at scale. Well, how are we going to get into the homes under the age of 3? It would be an unrealistic ambition. So this early years window is when attitudes and behaviors can be changed. Where are the educators, I want to know, who are teaching these children that each and every one of us is of equal value? And I'm not talking just about gender here. I'm talking about the whole range of inequalities that are expressed as the symptoms of the disease of an unequal mindset. I believe with all my heart that the only way to end this cycle of violence is to end the discriminatory mindset that is the root cause of it all. To think equal. And that is why this is the name of the initiative and organization, the charity that I have founded and am committing the rest of my life to. When men feel superior to women, violence and abuse follow. When so-called white people are not white, why do I say so-called? Because if I were white, then this would match me. It doesn't. So when so-called white people feel superior to people of color, we're all people of color, violence and oppression result. When one nationality or tribe feels itself superior to another, or becomes obsessed with nationalism, it ends in war and destruction and prosecution, or persecution, forgive me, persecution of people who are deemed to be unnationalistic. When one religion feels it is superior to another, then even religions which claim to be about peace and love end up as violent oppressors of the most vicious kind. Nelson Mandela said, "Education is the most powerful weapon we have to change the world." And here's what he meant by education. No child is born hating another human being. Because of the color of his skin, his religion, or any other background, a child has to be taught to hate. And if he can be taught to hate, then he can be taught to love. Education is the primary engine of progress. But when we consider how completely and irresponsibly we, our governments and their structures, our policymakers, have been ignoring the holistic nature of education, we really should hang our heads in shame. We are letting our children down. We are neglecting our children. We've considered education to be limited to numeracy and literacy and testing, preparing our children to be cogs in the machine of the labor market, because that is what we have come to value, the accumulation of wealth above all else. That is the real scourge. Here is what Gandhi had said directly about education. And it's a complete mirror to the insights that I gleaned from my 2.5-year journey making that documentary I mentioned earlier, which changed my life and my path. Gandhi said, "By education, I mean an all-round drawing out of the best in child and man, body, mind, and spirit. Literacy is not the end of education, not even the beginning. It is one of the means whereby men and women can be educated. Literacy in itself is no education," said Gandhi. He also said, "The real difficulty is that people have no idea of what education truly is. We assess the value of education in the same manner as we assess the value of land or of shares in the stock exchange market. We want to provide only such education as would enable the student to earn more. We hardly give any thought to the improvement of the character of the educated. The girls, we say, do not have to earn, so why should they be educated? As long as such ideas persist, there is no hope of our ever knowing the true value of education, let alone coming near to a responsible execution of it. How has it not occurred to us when designing the education we will nurture and prepare our children with that they need to be taught experientially and with practice, empathy and respect for others, emotional intelligence, self-regulation, the value of each and every human being. In short, social and emotional learning, the foundation that is required for human rights, for peace and prosperity to thrive. So during the first 5 years of life, children build the key social and emotional skills that profoundly influence the rest of life's outcomes. That is why social and emotional learning in the early years is the best form of social investment we can make. Think Equal is a call for a system change in education. It adds a new and missing subject, onto the compulsory curricula of world schools. And it calls for this subject to be taught from the earliest possible years in daycare centers and early years settings of all types. Think Equal has gathered thought leaders, visionaries in education, in gender, in human rights, in psychology, neuroscience, experts who have helped us over the past 3.5 years to design, construct, and deliver a program as a global resource for educating the hearts of the world's children and not just their heads. In the 3 years since its inception, Think Equal has created the world's first comprehensive curriculum in social and emotional learning with 3 levels for 3 to 6-year-olds to be taught over 3 years of 30 weeks each level, 3 times a week, 30 minutes each lesson, with 90 lesson plans each year, which means a total of 270 lesson plans over the 3 years, 80 narrative books over the 3 years, which we've created, which don't have a single man with a briefcase in a suit, or woman working in the kitchen, or girl in pink or boy in blue, etc. And more than 150 accompanying resources. We teach 25 competencies and skills, all of which we say are crucial because they are that holistic education that Gandhi and indeed Mandela have spoken of, and the Convention on the Rights of the Child and the Human Rights Declaration all talk about the need for a holistic education. We've just never put it into practice ever before. Can you imagine that? We've spoken about it for more than 80 years, for 2 centuries, actually, if you count Aristotle saying education of the head without education of the heart is no education at all. Pretty irresponsible. So it's 25 competencies and skills that we teach, which range from gender and racial and religious equality to environmental stewardship, peaceful conflict resolution, inclusion, global citizenship. These are just a few of the 25 I'm mentioning. And they are taught directly, head-on, and prescriptively, which is very important. The lesson plans are prescriptive, and they have to be, because you tell me how we're going to suddenly educate a workforce of teachers fast enough to not keep on letting children between 3 and 6 escape this window of modifiability, when we've treated our teachers in the early years as the bottom of the heap. They are the most important teachers in the whole of the journey at school. And we've underpaid them, under-respected them, under-trained them because we've considered them to be mere babysitters. How insane. How stupid. We're currently implementing the program in 16 countries. We're with 94,000 children to date. And in February, we're doubling that number in one fell swoop in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, where we're going in one go because it's scalable, replicable, prescriptive. We're able to do this. And we are giving this program in partnership with the government of the Eastern Cape, the Education Department of the Eastern Cape, to every single 5-year-old in the whole province. The Eastern Cape is the second largest and second poorest province in the whole of South Africa. We're in 6 continents. And we're in so-called developed countries as well as developing countries. And I say so-called because genuinely I don't believe there's a single developed country in this world. Evidence of the last few days, bear this statement out quite dramatically, I would have thought. We have major global partnerships by now. example with Yale Center for Emotional Intelligence, Montessori, UNICEF, UNESCO, the Pope, genuinely a partnership with the Pope. I've met him 5 times now. We're working very, very closely with him and his Global Compact for Education. The Institute for Healthy Minds at Wisconsin-Madison University, the UN. We have to commit, in closing, we have to commit, at last, to educating our children to embrace equality and mutual respect. We have to focus on breaking the cycle of gender stereotypes and value judgments of all kinds. And we must do this from the first day of a child's education to the last, on a compulsory, formal basis. We owe this to Gandhiji's memory, to Mandela's memory. We owe this, much more importantly, to the legacy we leave behind us and to the next generation. Thank you for your patience. I assume we have questions now. I hope so.
Yes, Leslie. After that, I think I expect to see some stunned silence in the audience, but I certainly expect a few questions. Any questions, thoughts that you'd like to share? Asking the audience.
I have a question. Whose dog? Is it yours, Subu?
Sorry?
I have a question. I said, whose dog? Is it yours?
Sounds like our dog, yes.
Sounds
Yeah.
sweet.
So waiting for questions. Anybody to...
Or make some comments.
Oh, make some comments, yeah.
Yeah.
Make some comments. Leslie, you have stunned our audience into silence.
I hope not. Or at least if silence, I hope I've not stunned them into inaction, because we need every single one of you to join this movement and help to roll this out in the world.
I think you've stunned us into silence, but not into inaction for sure.
Good.
Sonia, I think you said you can't get your mic going. Okay. There is a question there from Anjali Sharma, who's the Charter for Compassion India Education Lead. She says, who I know is also one of Think Equal's partners. I'll say, thank you, Leslie, for such an insightful session. I'm all inspired. Would like to know why only 3 to 6 years is the focus area of the Think Equal program, and do you have programs post that? So that's one for you, Leslie. Go for it.
Okay. Anjali, I'm not surprised you asked me that. And I have to confess, I irritate a lot of people by saying 3 to 6 and being so dogged about it. I mean, to some degree, I would normally say, forgive me for that doggedness. I'm always completely honest, so I express myself exactly as I feel it. But in this case, I don't ask for pardon for that doggedness, because this is pure and simple neuroscience. Not a neuroscientist in this world will tell you that above the age of 6, you can put in a foundational intelligence. You can't. Not in terms of social emotional learning. Facts, yes. Hearing, sight, they all continue to develop. But in terms of habits, habitual ways of responding, emotional control, truly, it flatlines the ability to fundamentally change, flatlines on graphs at 6. And I wish it were other, but it's not. Those are the facts. So we've been ignoring the very basis. It's like an architect. What architect would build a building from the ground floor up without a foundation, that skyscraper would fall down within a couple of years. Now, after 6, of course, change is possible, but it needs to have what has been learned, unlearned, and relearned. Why would we do that? Why would we have to unpick the wiring, the hard wiring in the brain of the neuro pathways that have been formed in order to have to reform them? Why wouldn't we just start from the beginning? Do you know how much this program costs? When you look at it over, because it's a one-off cost, it's about training the teachers, providing the materials. We never allow our teachers or our schools to pay for the materials. We raise the money in order, because we say it's a fundamental right of every child. And we do not want just the rich schools to end up, who can afford the materials, to end up teaching it. So we spend, I literally, you can hear I'm hoarse, right? Because I work 18 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm obsessed with this. That's why 3 to 6, I don't have much time. Look at me. I don't have much time left to achieve this mission. So sure, it would be great to continue to teach the 7, 8, 9-year-olds. It's critically important to do that. But there are brilliant people. Look, Learning Curve is doing that brilliantly. Why should we repeat what they're doing? You know, we don't need to invent the wheel. But you tell me who is dealing with the early years. Very, very few. And those who are, sadly, are not yet doing it with that range of competencies and skills that we believe are needed. I've partly answered your question very fully because of feeling that there may not be any other questions. But Subbu, have any emerged while I've been talking? Any others? Subbu, I can't hear you. You're on mute, Subbu.
Yes, I've done that a couple of times today, strangely enough. So, there are a couple of questions that have come on our YouTube live stream. Somebody by name Anamika Srivastava asks, how can we smash patriarchy and break gender stereotypes?
Easy. So easy to do. I mean it. The only way we can do it is in the way I've just described, by starting with the next generation. We would need to take adults who have already been programmed like robots, as I described. We would need to take those adults into therapy for many years to achieve that. It's not realistic. Who's going to pay the trillions of dollars to take all of us who were not educated with this consideration and love and nurturing? Who's going to take us into therapy? Nobody, right? We're kind of stuck with who we are. But the next generation, why should we let them go forth with this patriarchy, these stereotypes, when it's so easy to simply at the right time co-construct these neuro pathways so that they're equal? You know, we have tools, we have exercises that teach our children that every single human being, regardless of their gender, regardless of their race, regardless of their color, every single one of us are equal. You are the other me and I am the other you, and that is what our children learn. So that is how we can do it. And I've seen it with my own eyes, believe me. Since January 2017, when we started our first pilots, and we're now with several thousands of schools. I mean, I've seen it. It's easy. I've seen it happen within 4 months, let alone the 3 years that we have the program for. Subbu, the next question.
Okay, we have time for one more. I have two interesting questions here. One is from Monal from Kevalia. But we all know Monal, so we can answer that question separately. But I also have another question here. Monal, sorry about this. I know you'll hate me for this, but I'm going to...
Monal, I will answer your question by email. And actually, I make that offer. Oh, please, Not too many, because I've got deadlines today, but I will. I promise you. And if you're patient, it may take a couple of days, but I will answer any question you have by email.
We'll copy that question. So, yeah, requesting somebody to copy the question. But there's one question coming in from Devki Purohit from Deshpande Foundation. How do we nullify or temper the conflicting messages a child gets outside of the school setting? Perhaps perhaps more influential coming from a person in power, maybe.
No, that's not true. What is influential is what is happening in the brain. Now, I completely agree with you, and I wish to God we did not have to contend with those influences at home which are going to try to reverse the learning. But they will not be able to, and I'll tell you why. It's not rocket science, it's neuroscience, and it's absolutely simple. You build a neuro pathway. You use it, you repeat it, and that's exactly how our program is designed, because we've had the world's top neuroscientists involved in helping us design it. So all these lessons are scaffolded. That is the one thing we insist with our teachers. We make them sign an undertaking that they're getting the program for free, but they have to undertake to respect the order of the lessons and teach every single one, because it's the repetition. You see, a neural pathway could be formed. I mean, we're born with empathy. There's no question that we're born with a natural tendency to empathy. You put two children in babies, strangers, in a room together, stranger babies, the one will cry, the other one will cry in sympathy. So we're born with that. But if we don't exercise and practice that empathy, it's going to be pared away, because that's how the brain works. Those neural connections that are not repeated through experience, but we are repeating them in the classroom. So whatever the parents try and do, that child's brain is going to be pro-social, not anti-social. They will watch their parents and know that what their parents is doing is not right or not preferable. They will try to teach their parents. And I swear to you, we've seen so many instances of this, of teachers telling us that parents have come running into school saying, that thing with the colors that my child is talking about, you know, my child came home today, said, Mummy, you are in the blue zone, and you have to talk about it. Children are teaching their parents. Now, of course, they're not going to get very far. I have to be realistic about this, but still, it will stick, and it does stick. We treat children as agents of social change, and it's working.
Thank you, Leslie. Thank you for answering that question as well.
Again,
So thank you for that. I think that's all the time we have. Unfortunately, I wish we could have more time, but you know we have. And there are some other comments, but I'll share them. I'll share them with you anyway. I'll share the comments with you and a couple of important questions that you might be able to respond on later on. But in the meantime, Leslie, with your permission, may I go ahead and make that announcement?
I'm very excited for you to make that announcement. But before you do, I need to say something else, or I will be slaughtered by my people and my team. www.thinkequal.org. And in India, www.samanta.org. We do change the name. We're not interested in branding or building our organization. We're interested in reaching children. So in some countries, we rename ourselves because that's how the country would like it. Please go online. There are some free resources there. There's a beautiful book we've written with the World Health Organization called Rainbows and Windows about COVID. Sorry, Suba, you know me, you can't shut me up. But I had to say that, or I will be wrapped over the knuckles. Okay, thank you.
Absolutely, fair point. Fair point. So yes, here's a very special announcement that I'd like to make. Think Equal and Learning Curve are entering into a very strategic partnership to be able to bring early years social emotional learning to the state of Telangana to start with, and who knows where else we'll go. but certainly to the state of Telangana to start with. And over the next 3 years, the plan is to build out, implement, and scale this program across the entire state of Telangana. So there you have it. This partnerships coming together beautifully over the last few weeks, and I think Leslie, right from our first conversation, I think we resonated on so many levels, right? And so I'm absolutely thrilled at being able to announce this very strategic, very impactful, meaningful partnership between our organizations. And if
Me
you'd like
too.
to say something.
Chak de fate, mere pyare dost. I'm so
Love,
excited by this. The potential of this partnership thrills me. It makes my days bright and happy. Thank you so much, Subbu and Gayatri, both of you from Learning Curve. I love you deeply. Thank you so much for the partnership.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Leslie, and thank you so much for that really I think really inspiring. I think is the word to use, right? And I think we just cannot afford to fail our future generation. It's as simple as that.
Absolutely.
And
Not
we
anymore.
really need to do whatever it takes to ensure that they receive the right foundations, and not just the right foundations as we know it, the right foundations as is important for them. And I think that's the view that we need to take. So thank you for bringing that to all of us today. We love you and thank you so much for that. Fantastic.
Thank you too.
I'll,
Bye.
I'll, I'll end the session now, and thank you once again for being up so early today.
I'm going back to bed right now.
Go for it, please. Go for it. Bye. Bye.
Just for now. Okay.
No problem.
Bye,
Bye.
everyone. Thank
See
you.
you. And audience, we're getting ready for the final event, which is basically I call it the showstopper. Swaroop is going to be with us here today with her emotions masterclass. So do not miss this one, and stay tuned if you can. All right, bye, Leslie.
Bye. Bye.
Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back. Welcome back to Enabling Spaces. And we've always at Enabling Spaces we've always had this concept of a masterclass at the end. And this year we said that we've got to bring in the expert who can do this, right? And that expert is Swaroop Raval. Her journey from an actor to a teacher to a researcher to a I mean, it's just phenomenal. I think it's just stuff that most of us can just dream of. And Swaroop's energy, Swaroop's enthusiasm around bringing art and drama and life skills to children is just completely beyond compare, right? I think she's like one of those energizer batteries for everyone. So, and certainly for us because she's on our advisory board and she's our biggest supporter, she's our greatest critic, all at the same time. But today Swaroop is here with her emotions masterclass. So Swaroop, over to you completely, and the audience is all yours.
Thank you, Subbu. Thank you for inviting me. Like I promised to do it last time, but at last we're doing it. And it's fun because this way we're reaching out to so many people. The first thing I told Subbu was, at last I'm on. You know, it's so difficult to be sitting backstage and waiting. When am I going to talk to all of you all? So, hi everyone. Are you ready to start? Well, before we do something, let's just warm up because we're sitting all this time. So, can we raise our shoulder? So, let's raise our right shoulder first and then raise our left shoulder and then rolling and rolling back and rolling our necks. Just do what I'm doing. Oh yeah, doesn't it feel fantastic? Especially since we've been sitting for such a long time. In fact, even I have been sitting for a long time. How about different kind of handshakes? So actually, in a normal class, I would do handshakes. But then I thought we can't do handshakes. So let's do a different kind of shake. And let's shake our hand in different ways. How can you shake your hand in different ways? Just think of that and do that. Come on, move your fingers, thumbs. And so, are we ready to start? Okay, you know what? Our memories, our moods, our emotions, they enter our body, and then they enter our minds, and we imagine things, we live things, and all these things actually stay as incredible aesthetic experiences. Which brings me to the point, what are emotions? Emotions play a very important role in how we think, how we behave. What are emotions? Emotions are called feelings sometimes, and they include experiences such as love, hate, anger, trust, joy, panic. They are defined as complex feelings that result from physical and psychological changes that influence thought and behavior. Our thoughts, our behavior are influenced by emotion. Sometimes when we feel things, we behave in that way. When we behave some way, we start feeling things. When things happen to us, we experience emotions. So it's really very complex. They are subjective. So, do you know what subjectives mean? And if you're wondering why I'm talking like this, like generally explaining things that a lot of adults know, I know for sure that there are a few young kids on my program today or in my masterclass today. I know there's one young little girl from another country, and I know there are some other young kids from our country. And so please understand that this is reaching out to adults and kids who are in primary schools. Isn't this a little exciting? Why it is exciting is because just imagine doing a master class which is for everyone. And believe me, this is targeted for everyone. So if you're a kid, this is targeted for you. If you're an adult, don't think this is for kids. This is even for adults. And that's the exciting thing about life skills, understanding emotions, and art. There is no section of age group or ages and stages for what this is targeted to. Okay, so subjective. All of us feel emotions differently, in the senses that if I were to try to scare you, everybody would feel it differently. If we were at home alone, all of us would feel different emotions. And you know what? They're all correct. The other thing is the physiological response to an emotion. Our bodies react to emotions. Think about it. Sometimes your upper lip is just sweating. What emotion are you experiencing at that time? I'm not going to tell you. Think about it. When you're scared and you're really terrified, your nails are going into your hands, you're so tight. What are you experiencing? Think about it. Then there is the behavioral and expressive response. Somebody is angry, I'm just going to go and bash that person. Somebody is angry, I'm just going to withdraw. I just love you and I want to give you a hug, even if it's a virtual hug. These are behavioral and expressive responses. Now, why are emotions important? Because that's the way we behave. That's how we understand other people's behavior. This is how we manage and control and adapt to our behavior. A person must learn to manage his or her emotions. And when a person can do it effectively, that person is called emotionally intelligent. Emotional intelligence is the instinctive ability to feel emotions, to use emotions well, to describe emotions, to communicate emotions like I just did. I love you. To do it effectively, to do it well, to be able to communicate it, to recognize it. It's so important to recognize other people's emotions, to understand what mommy is feeling, what the boss is feeling, what some stranger is feeling towards you. Because a lot of things like empathy, self-understanding, all of them, the root of it is emotions. Because, for example, empathy is understanding somebody else's emotions and feeling it as yours and communicating that emotion. Do you understand? So you could not feel empathy unless you start understanding emotions. You need to be able to understand all the varied emotions. Yes? Remembering emotions and learning from them, managing them, understanding them, explaining emotions. These are all the skills that are necessary for an emotionally intelligent person. How does it help us? It helps us in our regular life. It helps us with our self-awareness. When we understand our emotions, when we learn to manage our emotions, it helps in self-management. It motivates us. There are some emotions like fear. When we understand them well and we manage them well, they're actually motivating. When we recognize emotions in other people and we understand emotions in other people, we learn to empathize, we build good relationships, and all that is, we make great teams. And that is like social skills. So, tell me, what is the emotion you are experiencing right now? Please write it down. If you want to write it in the chat, you can. Or you can write it down in your book, which you have. I'm sure you have a book, right? So write it. Yes, I am happy. Akhila is excited. Gayatri, thank you. She has experiencing joy. Um, can I tell you what I was feeling before this started? I know the spelling's wrong, but tense, nervous. Yes, Gayatri, that's interesting. So there are all different type of emotions you can experience. Have you written yours down? Subbu, so sweet, nervous before. Oh, tell me about it. You know something? There is civil work going on my building, and I had to literally go on my bended knees and tell them, please put it off for 45 minutes. And Subbu's running late, and I'm going, oh my God, I just hope don't they start till I tell them to start. Any case, we're having fun, aren't we? So write down the name of the emotion you're experiencing right now. Great. Yeah. Okay. So now, what about writing a few more names of emotions which you just kind of heard me say? There was that emotion I said that was motivating. Guess what that is? Fear. And people say fear is a bad emotion. Well, no, fear is not a bad emotion because it can be motivating, right? Like yesterday, I was making this incredible masterclass for you for the fear of failure. Yes, if I failed, y'all, it would be too bad. So I am, okay. Now, sometimes when we're working with kids, they don't know the name of emotions and they don't understand it very fast. So how about putting a sound to your emotion? do that in whatever space you are in, okay? So, for example, oh, did you get that emotion? Yeah. Okay, what about, what about, that's nice, Subbu, thank you. What about, did you get that emotion? Dimag Kharab is not a name of an emotion. So it would, Gayatri, you're right. It's irritated. So you, Asha. Okay. What about? Mwah. I know it's giving a kiss, but love. Yes, that's right. What about? Oh, yes. So it would be so great to put sounds to emotions. Okay, that's one exercise I want you to do after I leave, right? We can't do one whole class on just that because I want to move on to something that's really nice, and that is color. How do certain colors make us feel? Even though emotions are not visual and they don't have any color, we certainly associate colors with feelings, and they become linked with our experience, and they kind of become programmed in our mind. So, bright colors make us feel happy, make us feel joy. Muted colors make us calm. Dull colors draw us in, even though the feelings of colors with emotions is a very cultural thing. But there are some things which are common. Like, okay, one thing I wanted to tell you is that colors and reactions are rooted in psychological effects, in biological conditioning, and cultural imprinting. Remember that. So I remember, like my mother-in-law would always tell me, you know, these pastel colors you wear are such dead colors. And if you went to England and you wore a pastel color, you would be very hip. So, you understand what I mean? None of them are wrong. It's just the cultural imprint. Okay? Now, just imagine for 1 second, okay? Kind of, if you want, close your eyes and just imagine that you're outside the room in bright sun. Yes. Now open your eyes in this outside place, which is bright sun, green grass, blue river, lovely dark green trees, and the sky is light blue. How are you feeling? Happy, relaxed. That's true. Now just imagine if the sky suddenly turned dark and grey, and there were clouds all over, and suddenly the light blue lake is dark and grey, and everything has become dull. I don't think that would be very relaxing, would it? So now you understand how colors and emotions go hand in hand. We assign colors to, descriptions like black is, it's a color of mystery and domination, isolation. Yellow is a color of joy, enthusiasm, happiness. But sometimes yellow is a sign of cowardice. Like green is a color of hope, but it's even the color of jealousy. So, are we ready to start with some things? But before we do anything else, can we just draw lines on our paper? Take one sheet and you can take a black crayon or a pencil and just draw lines. Any kind of lines. You see, we have lines on our screen, but anything. They could be curly willy lines, they could be straight lines. And just do it. Straight lines, jagged lines, squiggly, zigzags. Okay? Okay. Now, stop for a minute and think of it as happy lines, sad lines. You think this works? Okay, I want to show you something. Okay, see this. Can you see the difference? See the happiness in the colors here and see the gloom in the colors here. Right? How about this? If you want to use this, you can. I love the frustrated one. You know, it helps me every time when I'm really frustrated and I'm doing all these squiggles. It really means I'm, like I'm really frustrated and, my mind's going, wrong. Again, there are no visuals of emotions, but this is kind of the way I can express it. Artists have done that. I want you to do this later on. I'm going to come back to you with this, okay? So I want to show you just one more painting because before I go back, just imagine if you were in front of this painting. It's a huge canvas. How does it make you feel? The pride and the joy and the energy. And see this. This is by the same painter. Okay, so now I'm going to do something for you that will make you feel really nice. Is I'm going to play some music for you, and I'm going to ask you. Wait a minute, just let me get this, okay? Yes, here I am. I'm going to play some music for you, and let's see what you draw, just lines with this music, okay? Draw whatever lines you feel with this music. How does it make you feel? Nervous, sad, scared, happy? Just think of all the emotions you are experiencing while you listen to this music. Okay, now lines. I want lines. Yes, joyful. That's right. But draw the lines that show joy. Okay, now something else. Isn't it beautiful? Draw the lines that make you feel this. Serene, sad, and the last one. Okay, one more. Think of the lines. How does this make you feel? Wasn't that interesting? Have you ever done this before? You should try it. It's great fun. And at the end, I'm going to tell you what's the meaning of this and how you can use this for so many things, okay? Directly, of course, for emotions. Is I know that when I used to be very, very upset, when I was a kid or, an adolescent, and I would sit in my diary and just go on doing squiggles and squiggles and squiggles. And, I would be thinking because I would be reflecting. And then after a whole lot of these squiggles were done, I was not sad at all. Okay, yes, okay, am I better now? Okay, I think that's because I went so soft with all that music. And I know when I'm irritated, I go on doing this. Now, this is two ways of handling it. This is the way you're learning to manage your emotions too. Not only are you understanding your emotions, you're managing them. The Zentangles that are so much in fashion. Well, I went on doing Zentangles when I was a kid and adolescent in school, and that really, 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 really helps you to start understanding your emotions and managing them. You'd wonder why, and I'll tell you why. Because ART stands for ART, that is action, reflection, transformation. And that is the action I was taking, and reflect on it. It kind of managed my emotion, and there was transformation. Now, I'm not going to go back to the paintings that I showed you, but you remember I showed you the different paintings. Now you have to take your crayons. Now think of some emotion like anger, happy, love, sad, shy, afraid, and draw with it. Take your paper and draw that emotion. Come on. So let's start with anger. Let's make it easy. Think of a color which makes you show your anger. Think of the lines that make you show anger, and do it on your paper. Yes, come on. You need time to do it. I will give you half a minute. Okay? Okay. Now let's do something for happy. Take a happy color. a happy crayon. And again, I'm going to give you like 30 seconds. Yeah, I think that's fair, right? Come on, show happy. I hope your lines are different from the lines which you did for anger. Okay, now. Okay, let me make it easy for you now before I fox you, okay? How about sad? How are you going to represent sad? Think of that. Come on. Again, another 30 seconds. Okay, now I'm going to really fox you. Try to show love just through lines. Color? Come on, do it. It's just fun, okay? There is no test for this. Super. Now, I want you to take another paper and I'm going to give you like, say, 2 minutes on this. I know it's a very, very short time. And after this masterclass, maybe on some other day, you can do this at leisure with a lot of time and you can send it to me. Yes? Okay. So, where am I? Yes. Now I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Take a fresh paper. Think of any kind of feeling you want to express using maybe 1 or 2 colors and do a drawing. Okay, your time starts now. It could be any colors and it could be any feeling. And I know I need to keep a little quiet because voices can be distracting. So for 2 minutes, I'm going to be quiet while you draw. Don't worry, you still have a minute. Just enjoy yourself while you're doing it. And this is just for you. Of course, if you really want, you can send it to me. I would be thrilled to receive it. You can take a photograph of it and send it to me. You can either post it on Twitter and tag me, or you can FB it if you're following me, or you could put it on Insta. Oh wow, thank you. You can put it on Insta and tag me. So I would love to see your paintings. It would be really nice. Oh, that's 2 minutes. Wow, it went really fast, didn't it? So I'm going to stop this. And Subbu, we do have time, right?
Swaroop, yes,
Or are we
it's up
done?
to you. How much time do you need? How much time are you looking? Do you want?
looking at one small thing which I love to do. So if you say
Go for
yes,
it.
otherwise you don't
Go for
turn
it.
it into a
Go
question
for it. This
thing.
is your stage. Go for it. Please go for it.
Great.
YouTube Live is on fire anyway. So please go for it.
Wow, how nice. I'm so excited. Thank you for this. I really love doing it, Subbu. So, okay, I'm going to do something very exciting for you, and that is using words. You know what? We really need to be able to express our emotions well. It is, this is the full sound, Manjushri. I cannot go louder than this. So, yeah, okay. So, sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Yeah, we need to know the names of emotions. And you know what? Just learning names by heart or like opening dictionaries and learning is no fun. And I'll tell you why you need to learn it. Like, just imagine if Subbu and Learning Curve said that there is going to be this lady who's going to do a master class. And you would think, yeah, it's some lady who's going to do a master class. Then Subbu would say that there is an educationalist or a teacher who's going to do it. And you think, okay, well, a teacher's going to come. It could be any teacher. Then he says that a Mrs. Sampat is going to do it. And you think, oh, well, it could be any Mrs. Sampat. But the minute Subbu says Swaroop Sampat is going to do the masterclass, you know exactly who is going to do them. So emotions are like that. You need to know the exact name of the emotion. It's not, oh, I'm feeling something. I don't know what I'm feeling. Well, if you're feeling something and you don't know what you're feeling, how am I going to know what you're feeling? Right? And you should be knowing what you're feeling because we all want to be emotionally intelligent. So, to cut the talk short and get into the activity, I'm going to teach you how to write poetry. Yes, we're going to write acrostic poems. Oh, yes, I wanted to tell you this. Can you see this beautiful self-portrait of irritation, of anger? Just imagine if all the lines were changed. Who's going to do me one? Please do me one self-portrait with just lines expressing a different emotion. Now, getting back to the poems. Here. Acrostic poems. Love. It's the song actually, and I love it. Love is for the way you look at me. Love is the only one I see. Love is very, very extraordinary. E is even more than that you adore can. What about glad? Glad. G gives energy. Glad lets you laugh, always makes you smile, does not make you feel lonely. And I wrote these specially for you all. Scared. Sometimes can make you cry, can make you nervous, can make you tense, reminds you of scary thoughts, can even make you shake, can make you shake. You know the feeling, oh, I'm so scared, does not make you feel relaxed. So, I want you to do an acrostic poem for me. And since we're really running out of time, how about you doing an acrostic poem for me and posting it for me? Okay? Take whatever you want, any emotion, just anything you want. I had written one for fear, but I can't find it right now, and I don't have the time. I'll share it for you. Let me put it that way. I'll put it on the Learning Curve site, and then maybe y'all can post your acrostic poems for me. How about that? Yes? So now you have to do two things for me. Yes? Or next time they have to ask Subbu to give me the whole day. So, okay. So, one painting and one poem. Will you do that? It's a great way of learning emotions, believe me. And there's nothing childish about it. Don't think about that. Just think, it's incredible. And for all the teachers here, try it with the kids, try it with the littlest of kids, and they will really learn this. And you can try it at home with all the adults too. It works beautifully. Okay, so let's see it. And back over to Subbu. Subbu, I think, do you have any questions? No. I mean, now there's no question
Uh,
answer for this,
no, no, there's no question. I think we're all thinking about what acrostic poem to write.
right? I know. Well, I will
So
pick
that's
one
what we'll
as
do.
soon as I get off this, but I want to say thank you and learning curve and Gayatri. Thank you very much, guys. I'm so proud to know y'all. This is such a fantastic conference y'all have done. And thank you for letting me share all this with everybody who's joined in. And all of you who've joined in, thank you very much. I think you must always, always, always just follow Learning Curve. They're awesome. Thank you.
We're awesome because we know people like you, Swaroop. That's why. And I think half the energy that we have comes from thinking about folks like you. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for making the world a better place. Thank you for being in our corner. We love that.
Yeah.
So nice of you. And we'll be on Twitter and Facebook with the acrostic poems and the art very soon. I'm sure people will be ready to share. So we'll share that with you.
You know,
Thanks once again.
you know why I was talking like this? Because I have an incredible, crazy group of people who've come on today. And I just have to tell you, there's one little girl called Aisha. There's one whole group of kids and people from Sarthak. There are a whole lot of primary government teachers. And guess what? Thank you, Subbu, for allowing my research students for coming on. And all of them are on. So I think this is really exciting. Thank you.
Very exciting. We loved it. Great way of. I think it's a great way of, closing an event with all this high, all this energy that we're taking back. So once again, thank you so much, Swaroop, for being patient with us, and thank you so much. I'll end the session now, everybody, and we'll just do a quick round of reflections before we close the event. So I'm ending the session now. Thanks again, Swaroop.
Hey guys,
Hello,
hey,
yes, Gayatri, go for it.
I'm so sorry to just start up, Sipu. It's okay, I guess. I am smiling, I'm still smiling because it was such a great session. I actually have my the poem ready also, but I'll not get into that. I'll probably message you later if you're interested. But then, thank you so much for to all of those who have stayed till the end. Molly, I see you're still there, and what I would like you to ask is, what was your highlight from today? For me, there have been like a plenty. I have my notepad is full, but I would like to hear from you all. Those on the live chat as well can message, and anybody here would like to tell what was your that moment, that just blew your mind. Anything that you really, really enjoyed? Raise your hand, and Sibu can pass on the mic to you. Anyone? I'm waiting. We started off with Nemo's performance, which is amazing, and there is a raised hand. Akila, yeah.
I I just had
Hi.
so I'm gonna share without any. hesitation here. So, like you said, Nemo's energy was just so contagious to start off the session. And when he said you can sing in your room, being alone in the room, just putting earphones and singing like a mad person, it was so much fun. And I think Mark and Molly brought so much insightful knowledge, and there were such little nuances that even though you're keeping on reading about this and doing some things, but there are still so many new things to learn. It was just super exciting, and I think
Indeed.
the data looking at it that way is always awesome for me. So then Leslie, with her honesty, it just hits you in the right part in the heart. It was brilliant and loved session by Swaroop. I'm like majorly dancing around in my room like a crazy person again. So I think it was such a roller coaster ride, and it was so beautiful. I loved it. Thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. Totally agree and resonate with lot of feelings of what you said. Yes. How about someone else? Manjushri.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Awesome. What a morning. It was such an amazing. I must congratulate you on the choice of speakers because each one had something that was so enriching and each one spoke from their own, their own wisdom, their experiences. So that was amazing. And everybody had their take, which was enriching us. So I don't want to really say any one speaker. They were all outstanding. So I give you guys the credit for having picked up the right kind of people for the space that you have, the
Thank you.
enabling space. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Manjushri. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And there is a saying that it takes a village to raise a child, and we are not raising one child over here. We are responsible for all the children in this world, and so I guess the entire planet needs to work together if our next generations are to live in a world of love, peace, kindness, and compassion, and everything that we've spoken about today. And I hope that we all work together towards this. And with that, I think Subbu, I will let you take over. You're on mute, Subbu.
I'm becoming an expert at talking on mute these days. Yeah. No, but I think I think it's been a great event. I think thank you so much for to the audience, whoever is here, all those folks who watched, all those folks who are on YouTube. Thank you to everybody. I think in hindsight, I think what takes weeks of preparation, just sort of runs by like that in just a span of 3 hours. And we, for one, are glad that we were able to, in some ways, recreate the experience of a conference that we were able to bring together. And I think just looking forward to exciting times, looking forward to more collaborations happening in this space. And thank you so much for being a part of Enabling Spaces 2021 and celebrating education with us. Thank you once again. This is Learning Curve signing off for Enabling Spaces.
Happy weekend, everyone.